fantastic guest now in studio, Brandon.
Yes.
Hey.
Good to be here. Good to be here. It's kind of my hometown, so it's nice to be able to drive down PCH from Newport Beach down here to beautiful Dana Point. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
Got to get back.
And it's so, we were filming via Zoom before, but it's always terrific just having folks in
Oh, I get it. No, I get it. I always prefer in person versus Zoom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we filmed 2 episodes, the dive stage, which has been, the recap I recall was you just went through really some horrific stuff.
Yeah, during the early, the childhood trauma, the 0 through 10 stuff was really, really difficult looking back.
Yeah. And then how was the drive for you going from Newport here to Dana Point and going by some of these places that, tell us about the triggering or non-triggering.
Yeah. So, because I went to Santa Margarita Catholic High School, I would always come down through Mission Viejo to PCH, and then I would drive up to Corona Del Mar where I lived while I was going to high school. And remember, I told you about that dive stage, how it was usually after soccer practice at around 6 o'clock at night. I would drive up through Laguna Beach. There was the boom boom room there.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd usually pull in, and really truly became a sex worker there, just having sex with a lot of men in their olders, in their 40s and 50s. So a lot of sexual trauma happened in Laguna Beach for me over the course of like 3 years. But I took that drive this morning to get down here. So I'm staying up in Newport Beach, and I was driving down PCH, and my heart rate didn't go up. I was just cool, calm, and collected. I actually smiled, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I have so many memories there. I was like, I used to stand on that street corner, but I'm not triggered. And I think the important message with that is the reason why I'm not triggered is because I've gone back to reprocess that trauma with my shaman and my therapist. And because I've reprocessed it, my inner child doesn't freak out. I think if I hadn't processed that, my inner child would be freaking out. For sure. It would be highly, highly triggering.
Yeah. And why I asked that is a classic textbook case of what trauma recovery really looks like.
Yes.
So many people think trauma recovery is about forgetting it, like magically
like a lobotomy.
That didn't work out so great.
No.
But you just personified the ideal goal for anybody working through a trauma is to allow those memories to pass through harmlessly without the blood pressure elevation and all the physiological, adrenaline and the whole thing. It doesn't happen. It's the memory. It is what it is, but not being triggered is the goal.
Right.
Yeah. And
it's in the fire.
Yeah. And the same thing with New York City. Right. Surviving 9/11 that we talked about also in the dive stage, surviving 9/11. New York City was a place that I would avoid. I think I avoided that for about 13 or 14 years. I'm doing math quickly in my head. But it was also one of the things that I had to reprocess, obviously, with my shaman and my trauma therapist. And one of the healing actions that I took, I always believe there has to be some also sort of action is, you don't want to avoid a place like New York City just because trauma happened there. Like avoiding something means that you still haven't healed from it.
Yeah.
And so I created a new memory in New York City by running the New York City Marathon in 2017. And that was, something I talked to my therapist a lot about. We started to reprocess, and we felt the final action of really healing would be creating a positive memory in New York City. And so running the marathon, you run through all 5 boroughs, and you really got to see the city coming together. It's 4 rows deep of people cheering you on along the way, and you get to see the beauty of New York City.
Yeah.
And it allowed my inner child to understand that, listen, there's so much love and beauty here. And it was so unifying. That I got to now have a great memory again of New York City, that I'm not always triggered by 9/11.
It's interesting you say that, because I worked on the World Trade Center as in doing my consulting work, and I was very triggered. I was there when the smoke was still rumbling out, and I walked down the street, and right after I passed a manhole, I actually stepped on it. It blew off, the top blew off with the underground fires that raged for, weeks after.
Right.
I was there under a week after the incident. And the museum, which is the case I worked on, the actual footprint with the two towers, I
Right.
worked on the reconstruction of the
It's beautiful,
memorial.
by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
was
even though
pretty.
I had all the plans and I knew all the top secret security and all of that, I didn't go in the building because I got to regulate my thing.
Right.
It took me about 7 years before I was comfortable going into that building. So you got to kind of know thyself, you know.
Yeah.
Some guy said that, I think maybe Socrates. And know what you're kind of capable of, because I kind of had to bottle it up because I had to press through the consulting assignment.
Right.
But I get it. Now I go to New York and I love it, but you got to kind of just be aware of where you are with this stuff.
Exactly.
And I didn't even realize, because when you're walking through trauma, and as somebody was really going into, I was a professional truly at going into survival mode because of what happened to me as a child, right?
Mhm.
We can't fight back when trauma happens as a kid. So we go into survival mode,
Mhm.
Yeah.
into that fight or flight response. And so when 9/11 happened, I was 21 years old. So I was still very much a child.
Yeah.
And I actually just grabbed cameras from NYU. And because, there was no security in New York City on 9/11. If just imagine the trauma that happened down there. You could walk everywhere you went. There wasn't enough police officers or firefighters
Right.
to build lines saying you can't cross here. Like everybody, you could walk wherever you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I remember grabbing cameras, and the footage is somewhere. I think it's in one of my parents'. We still have it. We just can't really find it. It's in one of our storage facilities. But I actually have footage of myself walking through knee deep of ash, walking through banks.
Mm.
And you could see like chairs turned over, like where people were hiding underneath desks,
Oh.
and walking through that. And so like that's still a very clear and vivid memory.
Yeah.
Thank God I've healed from it, but you don't understand. Like I didn't avoid it. I just kept walking into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's also why I became a journalist,
Yeah.
That's what we
Mhm.
do time and time again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that. Journalists see, that's what, that's a big part of what
Mhm.
journalists do, is look at these sites of tragedy and disaster.
Well, the BP oil spill. I know
Yeah.
that you consulted on that as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
Reading about you a bit, I covered the BP oil spill in the Gulf Coast. I was in Pensacola for about a month for
Yeah.
CBS News at the time when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, anchoring for CBS. And so I covered the BP oil spill, right? And so you're
Right.
just constantly dispatched to all these places of trauma
Mhm.
and stuff. And so, you have to have ice in your veins. But now I look back and I see a lot of broken people who are journalists, because
Yeah.
you have to be, in order to turn off that side of your brain.
Yeah.
So that's a learned skill that you get at some
Mhm.
point in your life. And I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of journalists have a lot of unhealed trauma
Yeah.
in order to be able to turn that on and off. Because when I finally really started to heal from my trauma in January 2021, about 12 years sober at the time, when I began doing the deep breath work and reprocessing childhood trauma, that was the end of my career, because I kept coming home every day at like 11:30, and I would just be hurled over my kitchen sink, and I would just be crying every day. Talking about parents who were killing their children, and, interviewing parents who had lost, their child
Yeah.
to a fentanyl overdose. And it was the first time I began crying during an interview. I've
Wow.
never cried during an interview when a mother lost her son, Isaiah, 15 years old, to a fentanyl overdose.
Wow.
And I broke down crying in the middle of her living room. And that's something that I had never experienced in 22 years of interviewing people who've had tragic situations.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the end. And so I
Yeah.
became too soft, to be quite honest with you.
I don't know
Everything
if-
caught up with you.
It did.
Yeah, the BP oil spill, the memory I have there was, of all things, it was a waitress who had a job, at one of the casinos, and the BP oil spill came along and everything got shut down. She lost her job. And I was talking to her, just kind of real talk. And she says, I have saved for my whole life. I just bought a little modest home. And then she lost the home.
Oh.
Right.
And it just, for some reason, her sitting with her and talking to her really brought home the tragedy. There's countless tragedies along the Gulf Coast from the BP oil spill, but for some reason, that one story, just seeing the sadness in her eyes, that her dream, which she'd worked for decades to accumulate enough money to buy a very modest home, and now is being foreclosed on because of this. You realize that the ripple effects of these things are they really affect real people.
Yeah. There's always people behind the tragedy.
Yeah,
Right.
there's people
Always.
behind the statistics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we're thankfully on the thrive stage,
Right.
and there's all kinds of things you've done. Your story is so impressive. I want to remind people your book is Mascara Boy. I'm sure you get this question all the time, but
Why is it called Mascara Boy?
about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I was bullied as a child, and I tell people all the time, childhood bullying is a traumatic life event, and just the simple fact that your child is being bullied at school, if your child does not heal from that, your child will eventually turn to numbing, some sort of activity that will numb, and so just bullying in and of itself is very traumatic for a child, and it happens every day, sadly. But yeah, I used to get called Mascara Boy on the
Just
school
because
bus.
you have nice eyes?
What I've been told by dermatologists, I actually have a condition that gives me 3 rows of eyelashes on my bottom lid, my
Okay, I'm
eyelid.
so jealous.
I know. And so like women are super jealous because what it does is it creates almost this dark shadow. And so, but how traumatizing is this? When I got into my news career, my bosses at NBC News at the time, executives called and said, take off that eyeliner that you're wearing. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And they're like, take it off. And it got so bad that one of my news directors actually came into the makeup room and he put his hands on my face and he like just grabbed my eyelid and wiped it and goes, why are you wearing eyeliner? And I'm like, listen, a-hole, I'm not wearing eyeliner. And then he like looked really close and he goes, oh my God, you're not. And I was like, get your hand off me. But like, even as an adult that's bullying.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'm not wearing eyeliner. Like I'm not wearing it. But then also viewers used to email in, and viewers are brutal. Like, now, mind you, I also want to say that I have incredible viewers. Like the great come also with the bad.
Yeah, sure.
And so I'm not calling out all of them because I have a huge support of amazing people, but there's a lot of ruthless people out there, keyboard warriors, who just send in, you look like a terrible version of Johnny Depp. Like, why are you wearing this? You're a fag, you're this, you're that. And it just goes down the gamut. But all of that, and then your bosses are like, oh, just tune it out. Just don't read it. Don't let it bother you. I'm like, how do you not? Everything we read, everything we watch, our bodies have to process. Like I can't read a negative comment like that and not have it hurt my inner child. Of course it hurts. Of course. And to act like it doesn't is suppressing it. Like you're telling me to suppress all that. And so I did that for so long. So I healed from it. And so I figured, well, why not title my book Mascara Boy as the biggest FU back to all the people who used that word against me that hurt me. So now I made it the title of my book.
I love it.
Well, success is the best revenge, isn't it?
Tisk.
Boom.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about life now.
Yeah,
you got super cool media company. You're into art. I want to just go through it all because you have a lot of interesting dimensions. Where do you want to start?
Well, we can start with Art of Our Soul.
Okay.
It's an art healing company that I created. The crazy part is when I began shamanism, I will call, like, I've been in recovery, go 13 years. I would say that my real thriving actually happened after my relapse in 2020. I was never thriving, in those first 10 years, 11 years of recovery.
Well, you're getting your feet back on that's survival. You're getting back in the
correct
feet on the ground. Right?
Yeah, and it took me a long time to finally do the healing work. I could have been thriving earlier on. And that's my biggest message to people all the time is don't just go to 12-step meetings thinking that you'll be in the thrive stage. Like, you will not be. Okay. They're not healing you from your trauma. It can be just a piece of your overall recovery, but meetings alone are not going to heal you and set you up to thrive. And I can say that from my own lived experience. So I did meetings alone for 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, and then I had a relapse. That relapse got me to do shamanism, which got me to do inner child work. So that happened in January 2021. In April of 2021, about 4 months after I did the deep breath work to reprocess I started having dreams at 4 o'clock in the morning, and would be woken up, and it was the same reoccurring dream. There was a little boy about the age of 10, and he was chucking a can of paint at my head in this dream, and it was waking me up, and I couldn't make sense of it. So I told my shaman Toby, I'm like, yo, Toby, there's this little kid. He's about 10 years old, and he's waking me up every morning with a can of paint. And my shaman looks at me and he smiles and he goes, I'm going to tell you what's happening. He goes, you're becoming so unfrozen from your childhood and your childhood trauma that your inner child is now coming out to play. You have to understand that your inner child, so much of your childhood was taken and robbed from you, that now he's coming out to play and he feels safe now to play. And so he goes, have you ever been an artist? And I'm like, no. I said, but when I first got sober eons ago, I remember my sponsor telling me, you need a hobby to like keep your mind busy. So when your mind starts to spin, and I said, okay, he's like, why don't you just go to the art store? So I remember doing it for a few months, a long time ago, and then it faded away. And so my shaman looked at me, he goes, I think this is spirit trying to nudge you back to get back into art. So why don't you go get back into art? And I went to the art store, got a bunch of canvas, got a bunch of paint, and just started turning my guest bedroom and my guest bathroom into an art studio. Started creating in July of last summer. So a year ago, July 8th, I woke up and 3 words were written on my nightstand on a crumpled up paper towel. It said studio, gallery, and school. And at the time, those 3 words meant absolutely nothing to me. And so in my next session with my shaman, I showed him the paper towel and I said, I wrote these in my sleep. I don't even remember waking up to this.
Whoa.
And I said, so make this make sense. And he said to me, he goes, Brandon, I actually see where this journey is about to take you. And I am not going to rob you of that moment of self-discovery. You have to discover this on your own. He goes, but make me this promise. You'll continue to create artwork as your way to continue to process that trauma energy. And number 2, you'll save that paper towel. And so I did those 2 things. He says, you do those 2 things, I promise you, spirit will reveal this to you. 2 days later, I truly had an epiphany, if you want to call it that, and heard a very strong voice and a strong pulling to the point where I suffered a mild panic attack because I'm like, what is this? What am I hearing? And I told my shaman, and I said, I believe that I'm being told to leave news to create an art healing studio for trauma survivors like me, to give them the gift of art and the way art has helped me heal from my trauma. And he goes, congratulations, your life's purpose has been revealed to you.
Wow.
Now go build it. So that was July 10th of last summer. September 27th, I anchored the last and final newscast of my career, walked off set, and never went back in the middle of a very big contract. And I opened the doors to Art of Our Soul on November 1st of last year. And so now I partner with 14 to 15 treatment centers, addiction treatment centers. They send their clients over to my art studio once a week for art healing sessions. And what's great is it's experiential therapy. So it's actually billed to insurance as experiential therapy. And the great thing is we've been tracked, scientifically tracked over the last 7 months. And our innovative approach to art healing has proven to lower anxiety, depression, and help with suicidal ideation. And so very soon, Blue Cross Blue Shield will be a partner of mine, and Mercy Care in Arizona. It's the state's largest Medicaid, Medicare provider for state healthcare. And they are partners of mine. In fact, I have 2 groups on grants from Mercy Care through my program. So it's being studied by biotech researchers.
My gosh.
So if somebody is interested, is there a website folks can go to?
It's called artofoursoul.com. It's pretty easy, artofoursoul.com. It explains how the program works, how our innovative approach to art healing works, which is very different than clinical art therapy. Even though what we're doing is very clinical in its approach to helping somebody heal in those early stages of trauma recovery. I am not open to the public. And that's very, very important. I only work and partner with treatment centers and nonprofits. And so I work with survivors of domestic violence. I work with survivors of sex trafficking, survivors of trauma. So it's not just substance use disorder, it's survivors of trauma. Brain Injury Alliance, it's a huge nonprofit around the country. Brain Injury Alliance, I work with their stroke survivors and traumatic brain injuries and have seen a huge impact on the studies on the brain and what we do.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That is just,
because I think sometimes, listen, I mean, it's getting clinical directors of treatment centers, they're in on it now, but you know, a lot of times the owners of treatment centers, they're like, oh, it's art. You know, like what's the first thing that ever gets cut in school funding?
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
arts,
And
the arts
Yeah.
and sports
Yeah.
and music, but
Yeah.
it's the arts. You know, where I would argue back that the arts are one of the most critical components to the brain and healing. And so now that I always knew it in my heart and my soul, which is why I opened Art of Our Soul, but to actually have the scientific data back, and this is really important for treatment centers to understand, that experiential therapy in what we have created at Art of Our Soul is 80% more effective than talk therapy. So experiential therapies, and it's not just art, equine therapy is experiential, right? You're experiencing something that is helping you heal is more effective, way more effective, 80 to 20 to then talk therapy.
Wow. So you went from like literally zero, no real connection with art, to not just this, but something innovative
Yeah.
that's kind of rocking the world of recovery.
Right. And it's so no,
That's
it's crazy.
pretty cool.
It is. And you know, it's so funny. I was talking to executives from Blue Cross Blue Shield maybe a month ago in Arizona. And I remember the president looked me when they came to tour Art of Our Soul because they had heard so much about it. And they looked at me and said, how'd you do this? In a very straightforward manner. And I said, excuse me. And they said, how did you do this? How did you create this? Like, you were a journalist of 22 years. Like, how did you do this? And you're already having
Right.
scientific data tracked. And they're like, how did you come up with this? And I looked at them and I said, I'm about to give you an answer that I'm sure can bet when you leave this building, you will all roll your eyes at me.
Yeah.
And I said, it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a pause. And I said, it's spirit working through me to help others. And I said, I had a dream about this. I dreamt it.
Huh.
And I said, so it's not me who came up with it, it's spirit. And I was given that gift after I healed from my trauma. And so my whole life's purpose is I can't take credit for it because I truly believe that spirit is working through me to help a large swath of people to heal. It's also why I don't look back with regret at my news career, even though it got very traumatic for me toward the very end. And I hated it. Because what I have come to believe is that I was given that gift and that platform in order for me to do what I'm doing now, and that I couldn't have created what I have created now had I not had that career that I had. And now I'm able to use that platform for truly a greater good. And
Yeah.
it's not for myself. You know, and I truly said, I can't take credit for what I'm doing. I take credit for the effort that I put in every single day. That I will take credit for
Right.
because I pour my heart and my soul into it.
Yeah.
But the idea and the gift that I have been given, because how do you just start creating really art in 2021? I watched a 10-minute video on YouTube, how to mix paints. And then I just started going at it.
That's crazy
Yeah.
interesting. You know, I don't know if you know this, but the invention of the electric guitar, Leo Fender, it happened because of a dream. He wanted to be a saxophone player. He had a dream, and that's where we get the $1 billion a year business today.
I believe it.
Yeah, and your story, I don't want to get into that, but my point is that he had a dream that ended up, he followed that, and it's so uniquely parallel to your experience, and I guess I haven't had that experience. So
Me
maybe,
neither. Me neither.
but that sounds
I'm
like
waiting.
that's super cool when you and I want to hear more about Toby, your
My shaman.
Yeah, can you tell us more about him? And
I'll tell you how I met him because people ask me all the
Tell
time.
us
I
the whole-
speak
tell
I
us the
speak
whole thing,
so
yeah.
highly about him. Obviously, he's a huge part of my healing journey. He refuses to take credit. He says, "Don't ever put me on a pedestal. Don't
Okay.
ever put me on a pedestal, Brendan. I have not healed you. Spirit is working through him to help me heal." Is how
Okay.
he puts it.
Explain what a shaman is for people who don't know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a shaman is a true healer. You know, they're using through deep breath work, they're able to get past the frontal lobe. A lot of people hear of ayahuasca journeys or shroom journeys, usually are led, or fire ceremonies, sweat lodges. Those are usually led by shamans. And, you know, they're healers. And, you know, there's shamans on the Hopi reservation, you know, they call themselves medicine men or medicine women. You know, but they're all true healers, and they're able to connect. Essentially, they're able to connect with spirit in helping you heal, and they're able to connect in order to understand what you need to heal. And so so people can, I'm sure they're listening. No, actually, a lot of people are always asking me for Toby's number. So I think we've gotten past the point
I
of people
did.
being like, these people are like liars or whatever, or they're fakes. They're not psychics. Okay, that's really important that we understand this. They're not like, don't have a crystal ball and they're not telling you what's going to happen in your future. They're able, truly on a holistically level, able to connect with spirit.
Guides.
They are absolute spirit
I don't know
guides.
if I've ever met one, but it's fascinating.
There are, and of course, right, there's frauds to every industry.
Right.
In
Yeah.
every industry, whether it's medicine, there are frauds in medicine. So do we deny all medicine?
Right.
No, we should not.
Right.
So are there fraud shamans out there? Of course there are.
Yeah.
But it should not discount the real ones who exist.
Right.
I met my shaman through my trauma therapist in Alaska. She's a world-renowned trauma therapist, Pat Bastani up in Alaska. And she had read my book and she wanted to work with me. And so that's how I connected with her. And after I was suffering suicidal ideation, she looked at me and during session, she goes, I can't help you any further than what I've done. It's time for Toby. She brought Toby, a shaman, into her therapy practice. He worked under her license in the therapy and was approved by insurance so that her, really high risk patients who she knew that she couldn't really help on that deep of a level, she started to refer to him. So the great part about it is I would do sessions with him through the deep breath work, getting past the frontal lobe, lower part of our brain where that trauma memories are stored. So I would do reprocessing work with him. He would then share those notes with her. So then in my talk therapy sessions, we could really rationalize and get a better understanding about how do I now as an adult kind of work through what I did with him.
Amazing.
Now I just work with my shaman. I was with my trauma therapist for a couple of years. And now I just work with Toby on Tuesdays.
Wow.
Fascinating.
I love how you attacked this issue. I mean, a lot of people are kind of steamrolled by their trauma, but you took it on. I mean, you went to the professionals, you experimented.
Yeah.
With
the various remedies and solutions with this mindset of I'm gonna make this trauma my bitch.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Really. I mean, being real. I mean, you were gonna take control of it.
Yeah.
And you found the right people that have obviously brought tremendous healing. That's just
Yeah,
I
wish more people would do that. But you also said a couple of minutes ago where thank God that you had your broadcasting career, because had you not been sitting in that living room with that mom who lost her 15-year-old son, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today. And I really wish people would take charge of, their mental health, and there's no shame in it. Go talk to someone, process, and you took,
well, yeah,
the bull by the horns.
Yeah. One of the things that is a big agenda of this podcast is, and again, you're exemplifying it like ideally, is talking about the garbage, which a lot of people do the classic thing. I did it with my childhood trauma of being born with a congenital heart defect. I didn't want to talk about it. I buried it. I hated it. And whenever it came up, I could feel that surge of embarrassment, that surge of, I don't want to talk about it. And it was just it was a topic I wanted to get through as fast as I possibly could.
Exactly.
And then, distract myself with something else. But you're just laying it out here. It's like, yeah, I went by the little shrimp. That's where I was a sex worker. It's just, but that's what trauma recovery really looks like, is that letting the memories, it is what it is, pass through harmlessly, and then experiment. There's a whole chapter in my book called on experimenting, finding different things. There's not one path that fits everyone.
Exactly.
So it's a shaman for you, which has obviously been tremendously successful with Toby. I'd love to meet the guy sometime. And then for someone else, it's, last night I was at Pastor Phil's church up with the drug recovery crowd. It was so much fun. Well, I took my son up. He hasn't been to church in a while.
That's a great place. That's a great place.
You
We'll introduce
know
you.
there was a church by some of the jokes they were telling, which were hilarious.
But
But anyway, but that works for certain folks. I mean,
just like AA works for certain
It works
folks.
for certain
Yeah.
folks.
Exactly. You know, speaking about trauma, it literally 10 years after my sister was murdered, it bit me in the butt big time. Big time. I attempted a suicide, was inpatient for 10 days, outpatient every single day, 8 to 3 for 2.5 months. So talk about processing, right? So there was a time where I couldn't even drive. I would drive up to LA just to put a white rose in front of my sister's back door every June 12th. And I would do that. And I would just stand there and I would, you know, and I would just, you know, because white roses were like her favorite. And I did that every June 12th.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I just, you know, this is how I totally forgot about it, you know, until this is like masterminding, right? Where it's like, oh my God, yeah, I totally forgot about that. And then there was a time where I could not even go up there because I was triggered by all the memories. I would go by Rockingham, I'd go by Bundy. So a lot of trauma. But then 10 years after that, guess who I was mad at when I was in the hospital? I was mad at Nicole, not OJ. I was mad at Nicole
For dating him.
No, not for dating him, but for not telling me. I mean, she had so many opportunities to share her story
She was
with me.
struggling.
Absolutely. And then
Shame, though.
absolutely, you know,
She was
domestic
buried
violence
in-
victims,
yeah,
right?
I mean, that's what DV victims are. They harbor that
A
shame
lot
that
of
they carry that burden just like child sex
Yeah.
victims do. We carry that burden where you know, an outsider's like, why are you carrying that burden? It's happening to you. But we do, and that's probably why she never shared that.
Exactly. It's fear, guilt, and shame, you know.
Yeah.
But then and then in 2017, I was assaulted. He never touched me, but it was my ex-boyfriend's son, and it warranted a 5-year restraining order. My mom was so like, she goes, "You can't come around me. You're gonna give me a stroke," because I was so hyper vigilant. I was so angry. I was literally traumatized, attempted another suicide, wrote a note this time. Last time I didn't. This time I did, and processed through that. Now, you know, my former employer, I was like, "Why do you look so familiar? You look so familiar." And you look like the guy who assaulted me. But I wasn't triggered by it because I had, you know, that's the critical,
do the
that's
work.
the important thing. It's like reprocessing, going through, sitting in that fire, like you always say, right? Going through that tornado of chaos. So that when you drive, you know, past a red car or the boom boom room, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it becomes your experience, but it's not your identity anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Brandon, the term sit in the fire it comes from San Quentin prison, where I volunteer from time to time. And the inmates there, they've come in with a lot of trauma. They've
For
committed
sure.
a horrible crime.
Yeah, but it's
there's
all
always a
rooted in
backstory.
trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a backstory that's even more traumatic.
Mhm.
You know, you hear about they have a crime impact statement where you sit there and they go play by play of their crime. And it's talking about trauma. But then you hear their childhood story
I know.
and it's more horrific usually.
Usually is.
And sitting in the fire is the term we give to just, you know, just sitting there with this full frontal nudity, you know, metaphor of bearing it all,
Yeah.
you know, as ugly it is.
Did you know my shaman even tells me that even some of the people that he works with just suddenly stop because doing that deep trauma work and going back to the trauma and just the process of going back and reprocessing it, it is heavy lifting. Okay, this is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
But what I tell people, it also doesn't take a long time to get through. So while you are doing the heavy lifting, just know you're not going to be doing that for a really long time. So, you know, I've experienced the highest joys of my life. I would say 6 months after I began working with him and really truly becoming free. I've been working with him since January 2021. So what does that make it? About a year and a half or so. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. So, and that's compared to about 12 years of just going to 12-step meetings. And so there were times, you know, my sessions are about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours at times. And while I'm screaming almost like it's an exorcism through parts of it, you know, because you're going back to those moments and you are screaming at your attackers or you're screaming and you're reliving those moments, you know, that it's hard, you know, it's really hard. But he says a lot of people just stop because they don't want to face it anymore because it's that much heavy lifting. But what I will tell you is when you brought up again, when I was interviewing, it's really important to talk about this. When I was interviewing the mother of Isaiah, that 15-year-old boy, that was the last interview I did. It was August of last year. So it was a year ago, almost to the day. It was my last TV interview story. And when I told you I broke down crying, I actually pulled off to the side of the road and I called my news director and I was like, I don't think we're going to be able to use this interview. I cried the entire time. And I did my first aura clearing with my shaman in May of this year. And what I mean by aura clearing is we talk about soul attachment. And I don't know if you've ever heard of soul attachments, but when we are traumatized, our vibration, we're constantly living and recycling that trauma throughout our lives. We are living at such a low vibration, our energy, that other souls can easily attach onto us. And so I did my aura clearing and I had 5 soul attachments, one attached to me at age 5. And my shaman goes, what happened to you at age 5? And I was like, I had scarlet fever at age 5. And he goes, okay. Wow. He goes, a soul attached to you at age 5 and has been living with you this entire life. And he goes, Brandon, I heard him in this session. I'm silent through an aura clearing. It's 2 hours. I'm silent. I don't say a word. And I hear him talking. He's actually talking to the souls throughout the chakras of our body. And he goes, and I remember him saying, you need to leave. This is not your body. You need to leave Brandon's body now. They're all waiting for you on the other side. And he goes, it's okay. You will not be punished. You will not be punished. You need to cross over. At the end of that session, he goes, Brandon, he goes, I need you to take me back to last summer. I get goosebumps talking about this. Yeah. He goes, Brandon, he goes, where were you this time? He goes, where were you last summer? You told me you did an interview with somebody about the age of 15. Where were you last summer? Take me back. And I was like, yeah, Toby, I told you I was interviewing that mother who lost her 15-year-old son, Isaiah, to a fentanyl overdose because he was experimenting with a drug. And he goes, take me back to that. And he goes, tell me what else happened. And I said, well, I remember that she told me something very private about him that I really don't even want to repeat on here because to not violate her privacy, but it's something I connected with. And that's why she told me. And he goes, okay, that's why he had so much shame. He thought he was never going to make it. He thought God was going to punish him for the choices he was making at age 15. And he goes, and that's why he was afraid to cross over. He goes, Brandon, what else happened? And I said, well, she actually showed me security footage of her house, something that we did not use in that interview that aired on CBS. And he goes, what did she show you? And I said, she showed me security footage. And I saw Isaiah walking up the stairs. Like I saw his soul. I saw his soul going up the stairs. And I was like, it wasn't doctored. I watched it on her security footage. And she just goes, look what I see in my house. And he goes, Brandon, Isaiah, his soul attached to you when you did that interview. He goes, where did you do that interview? And I said, I did it in their living room. And Toby looked at me, he goes, okay. He goes, Isaiah attached onto you in that interview. Gosh.
I got tears in my eyes.
And he goes, he crossed over though in our session. He left your body. And I felt it. Like, and I know like people, I felt it leave my body. Like I felt each one of the souls like leave. And it was really, after that session ended, I cried for 3 days to the point where I still was at a low vibration. And so we did an emergency session and he did it and we did more clearings and we finally got it all to leave and closed up and he put a shield around me. And I know that's really hard for some people to listen to because it's to some, this may seem very far out there, but this isn't just happening to me. I'm not unique. And that if we've been traumatized and we are living at that low vibration, you feel that other people are this is going to be really hard for me to explain, but a soul attached to me that was a drug addict and he was trying to numb himself because I couldn't understand. And I told Toby, why am I having an urge to use? I'm the happiest I've ever been. Why am I having this urge to go use? And he goes, it wasn't you. It was Isaiah living in you, trying to numb. Wow. And they don't understand that they're living in somebody else's body. They're that confused. And so it's called soul attachment. Google aura clearings because this isn't happening to just me. Yeah. So if you feel like something else is living in your body, and you feel uncomfortable in your own skin and you have faced a lot of trauma, it could very well be you're living at such a low vibration that other soul energies have attached onto you. It is why my shaman tells me that when he's driving down the road and if he sees a fatal car accident, he immediately speaks to spirit and go, put a shield around me, and do not let this soul attach to me. Soul attachments are real.
I've never
That's
even
so
heard of it.
fascinating. And this is all brand new to me. And you know,
I just ask people to be open to it.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's fascinating. And I purposely have gone to Egypt and Islam, and in fact, I'm going back next month to India and Hinduism and Buddhism. Of course, we are in a Christian society predominantly.
Yeah.
And I think all these different dimensions bring something of value.
Mhm.
So I have respect. I've learned something of value from every various angle.
Mhm.
This is a new
Yeah, be open.
dimension. And so I'm listening, but admittedly it's a new topic.
I remember. Oh, sorry.
Well, they're just that. I mean, one of the chapters in my book is on spirituality and the need to address it, however that looks to you.
Mhm.
Correct.
I don't-
Spirituality
I-
must be part of our lives in recovery.
Absolutely.
It has to
And
be.
you're bringing that dimension again. Really, there are people there are kind of, I call them the atheist, secular, ultra naturalist thing. And I've been through enough of the sciences to realize there's something going on here that is quite inexplicable through
Mhm.
science. In fact, you get into quantum mechanics and some of that science is so batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
It makes this look, quite normal. So I guess what that's saying is there's permission, at least in my mind, for people to explore what they connect with.
Yeah.
And so I always want to be respectful of whatever that is.
For
Right.
sure. For sure.
And that is just so mind opening, so mind bending.
And I like how you say be open. I did a chakra cleansing one time. I was
Yeah.
in graduate school and I absolutely hated my practicum, but I couldn't speak up because my supervisor was like known for not signing off hours. And then I was in a relationship where, I mean, it was fine, but he just bugged me. He really bugged me. But it was like we were all in a circle. It was probably about 30 people and our eyes were closed and she got to the throat chakra. I actually had to leave the room and I bawled. I went down the hallway. It opened up everything. The next day, I like the final signature on my hours was completed. I broke up with my boyfriend. Like everything just kind of opened up because because the chakra, I was able to speak my voice. So it may sound hokey pokey and pop psychology
It
to a lot of
does.
people, but there is true validation in this.
Well, the
I-
fact is, unresolved trauma, particularly childhood trauma, is the number one problem on planet Earth. That
Yeah.
is my position. It's a strong position, and it's based on science and statistics. It's not the drugs and alcohol. That's all just
No.
numbing.
Yeah,
That's just numbing.
That's just numbing.
That's why I always say too, and this is what along these lines, and this is where I get a lot of pushback from old timers in 12-step recovery, is that I do not believe, because I believe that trauma is the gateway.
Yes.
Okay. Trauma is the gateway. I don't care if you call this a genetic disease or not,
Mhm.
trauma triggers it.
Mhm.
Because we can all be predisposed to genetic disorders and we don't always get them.
Mhm.
Something triggers it. And so I'm a firm believer that trauma is the gateway. So I believe that if you heal your trauma, you will never abuse the drugs or the substances in the way you used to, because you don't have something to numb out.
Right.
Right.
And that is where I lose a lot of people in traditional 12-step models. And I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like they can have their beliefs, but I don't believe once an addict, always an addict.
Yeah, you said
meant
that
that-
on
yeah.
one of our last episodes, and
It's
Well,
labeling.
yeah, I mean, let's dive into that a little bit, because I have a relative who goes to 12 steps,
Yeah.
and he's quite I don't want to say religious about it, but he's
Oh
quite
no, they're big
devoted
book
to it.
thumpers. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
quite devoted to it.
Yeah.
And
I used to be very black and white. And by the way, in the first 10 years of my 12-step recovery, I was
Yeah.
very black and white about recovery. So
Yeah.
this is a new phenomenon that has changed through my own lived experience and actually healing from trauma. So I come at it from a very different
so
perspective
Yeah.
now.
are you saying that if you really, truly, authentically deal with the trauma,
Correct.
in other words, if you kind of do kind of a half half-assed approach to
then it
trauma
won't work. You're
recovery.
not healing. So
Yeah.
to thine own self be true, which is taken from a
Right.
12-step model. Like you know yourself, to those people out there, if you really haven't done the healing work and the reprocessing work of that trauma. So I also believe that addiction is on a spectrum. Okay. And they say in the big book that some are sicker than others.
Mhm.
Okay. So even
Okay.
Bill W. back at the time when they were writing that book understood that some are sicker than others. That's telling you that there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Just like with autism, there is a
Sure,
spectrum.
Right.
Just
that
like with
makes
certain
sense.
cancers, that
Mhm.
there's different stages of
Mhm.
cancer, right? That is a spectrum into when we can help somebody heal.
Right.
So I'm not saying that everybody that this applies to 100% of the people, but I also believe that if you were using those substances to constantly numb out and you do not have SMI, which is severe mental illness, you're right. I absolutely believe if you've done the deep-seated reprocessing of that trauma, that you will not abuse those drugs or alcohol in the exact same way.
Yeah.
Mhm. I
And-
agree.
And going back to your art therapy, which I've really got to dig into and check that out. That's super
Mhm.
cool.
Well, I'm doing manifestation work that we're going to be opening up here in Orange County, so
You
that you
are?
can actually just do
Oh,
classes
nice.
here in
Yep.
Orange County very soon.
What's
It'll be in Newport Beach, Costa Mesa.
nice?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it now? You mentioned drugs and alcohol. Is it also the other type, workaholism or
No, it's all
gambling
trauma based. So I
addiction?
don't close my doors. It's all trauma based.
Okay.
And when I first got into it, I thought it would only be for substance use disorder. But then I realized I had all these other organizations reaching out to me saying, hey, we work with survivors of domestic violence. Would you be open to us?
Mhm.
And I really meditated and I spoke about it with my shaman. I said, well, wait a second. It's all trauma based. And if I come from the belief that trauma is the gateway, well, then what I'm doing is helping people heal their souls and heal their trauma. So it should be open to all trauma survivors. So
Right.
that's why we open the doors to any sort of trauma survivor groups.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
And with-
we're keeping our eye on that.
Absolutely. And then with my connections in domestic violence, right? So
Right.
my advocacy. So
It's going to be
door-
very
it's-
huge. And what's really
absolutely.
important and what I've also opened my doors to is that people can bring their children. And so
see that.
there's one group I work with, the Arizona Women's Recovery Center. It's a 3-year-long program. And these are women who have been, severely neglected, abused, or even sexually trafficked in their lifetimes, and they have children. And they actually live with their child on campus as they're getting sober over these 3 years. And so they actually bring their child to my art healing studio for their sessions, and it's very important. And I'm trying to work with the 100 Club of Arizona, and these are survivors of law enforcement officers who've been killed in the line of duty, so that a majority of them are mothers,
Yeah.
so that these mothers can reconnect with their kids and create new positive memories with their child. So the way they sit at the table during our art healing sessions, they're actually creating side by side, and it's creating new memories for the child and the mom to bond again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be really important for survivors of domestic violence in order for those moms, a majority again, women,
Right.
not saying that men aren't, victims of domestic violence, but a majority are women, so that they can connect with their child in a really positive environment
Yeah. I love that.
and heal
That's
together.
so, yeah, that's so
Yeah.
critical.
It's critical.
Yeah.
So you also have a media company.
Yeah, so I'm partners with a media company. My former co-anchor, Carrie Pena, we co-anchored together in 2014 and 2015. She left the news business back then, and so I've joined her now. And so we shoot documentaries for really large healthcare companies, and we really talk about different modalities that they're doing. We launched a morning show called Good Morning Sunshine. It's a YouTube show, and it's based on behavioral health. So we talk about issues that are going on in behavioral health, and then we talk about modalities that can help that person heal from it. So it's a 30-minute show on YouTube. It's called Good Morning Sunshine. Optum Health is now our title sponsor of the show, and that's a
Wow.
pretty big deal because
Yeah.
Optum
That's a
Health
very
is
big
big.
deal.
Sure.
And so they're huge believers of it. And so, we're really excited to partner with United and Optum Health in order to continue to produce that show.
So you're like
That's
just
amazing.
blasting off and all kinds
Yeah,
of
it's really great.
Thanks to Toby.
the media, you got the YouTube channel, which I am going to check out.
Yeah.
You know what, last night when I showed up with Pastor Philly, he's like, you really did show up. I said I would.
Yeah.
I come through. I'm going to check that out.
Well, we talk
for
about
sure.
different things. We talk about ketamine clinics and the impact that's having. We talk about microdosing, and I sat there and I spoke with Dr. Sue Sisley, and it's a long format show, as far as our interviews go for 10 minutes, which is so anti what local news used to be,
Yeah.
which was one of the things I hated about local news or even network news. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, seriously, you're going to air a 90-second story that should be 10 minutes
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
And so I always said, if I do go back into that realm, no producer will ever wrap me.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I said, if
Yeah.
we do this and we do this show, no producer will ever wrap me. I know when I'm done asking my questions and getting the information that I need. Understand? Are we all understanding? I'm in.
And that's why we started this, because again, right? You have 90 seconds that, should be
Yep.
10 minutes. So
Correct. You
this
talk,
is why, this is
you
why we
talk
keep it
until
here
you get
forever.
everything you need out.
Yeah.
I was on CNN once, and at the end they go, "You were so good. You're on for 7.5 minutes." Like,
That never
it's like-
happens.
Never.
and they go, I go, 7.5 minutes. That's nothing. I go, you don't understand. It's
Yeah.
normally,
It's 2
on and
minutes,
off.
2 to 3
Yeah,
minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess 7.5 minutes is a big compliment. So you mentioned microdosing.
Yeah,
and I
huge
got a great
proponent of
buddy
it, yeah.
who's really kind of gotten into that. Now, I got to tell you, the old 63-year-old me
I get it.
initially was kind of like, whoa. But you know what? I sat down at lunch with him. I said, I want to have an open mind. Explain it to me. And
Right.
he swears by it.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
So, like we always say, there's not one program that fits all. And if somebody tells you that they have a program that will cure all, run it from them, because
Yeah.
it's not
Mhm.
true.
Amen.
And I even
Right.
say that to doctors.
Mhm.
You should, like, for example, if you're sick, do you only, like, really, really sick, do you get one doctor's opinion?
Mhm.
My God, if your answer to that is yes, please, for the love of God, get 2 or 3,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yes.
not one doctor has all the answers. And
Yeah.
it's usually the arrogance of a doctor who says that they do,
Right.
right? And
Right.
unfortunately, there is a lot of arrogant doctors. So,
Yeah.
so I say that because there's not one program. It's not a one size fits all approach to recovery. There's just not. And that's why, just the abstinence model of 12 steps does not work for everybody.
Mhm.
And can we just agree to that and understand that? Because we'll be in a better place if we do, right?
Right.
And just
Right.
as society as a whole. Because, how many people, if you're just a black and white person, this is going to get to microdosing. If somebody comes to you and they're not quite ready to give up drinking because they were a heroin addict, so the 12-step model would be like, okay, well, you're not done experimenting. Keep drinking, keep going at it until you hit rock bottom. And I'm like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
grab that person.
Right.
Now let's grab them and see if we can help them. So that's the difference. And so, because unfortunately, I did that black and white. I told a couple of sponsees, no, you're not done yet. Oh, you're still doing that? You're not done yet. Just keep going using. And if I could take that back with the knowledge that I have now, my God.
Well, what would you say to that person
Yeah.
now?
Oh, now I would say that's cool. Then just keep drinking. Let's help you. What was your trauma? And let's just start digging into what was your trauma.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then let's heal you from that so that you don't end up abusing alcohol. You don't abuse anything else. So that's harm reduction model. And
Yeah.
so I would say to that person, that's okay. Keep drinking. I don't care. I'll still work with you. Fuck.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
let's just try to keep you from using heroin.
Right.
Right.
And then having open dialogue, because now they're going to be vulnerable. Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. He's going to talk to me. I'm not being judged about having a glass of wine or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then we go through those conversations of like, what happened to you?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
what happened to you? And let's go back and heal you from that. Now, the reason I want to get it, did you have a question about that?
Well, I kind of do. One is that you're right. The drinking is a Band-Aid for the real
Mhm.
problem. And
Correct.
I think you've
Mhm.
just pointed that out. I have a friend, and she was suicidal, and she got drunk off her ass every night. And she looks back with fondness to say, that kept me from killing myself.
Yeah.
Jumping off the bridge, because she had a bridge about 12 blocks away. She had it all planned out. But every night she got so drunk, she passed out and didn't commit suicide. So, you can look at it judgmentally, drinking to the point where you pass out, in a very harsh, judgmental
Mhm.
way. But in her, in her mindset, it was a
saved her
good
life.
thing, because
Because it
it
was
saved her
keeping her
life while
alive.
she was
Yeah.
kind of processing through things. She's much healthier now.
Yeah.
Right.
But are we kind of saying the same thing?
Mhm.
Is that similar?
Yeah, I just tell people, like, listen, I don't want to say no to you, because if we say no to you, you're going to feel more shame. Like, you're going to feel more outcasted,
Mhm.
like, oh,
Right.
even these people won't even accept me, or they won't even listen to me.
Yeah.
And I just think that, when we look at percentages, the 12-step model has a failing rate. I mean, if you're in your 60s, that's a D, that's not passing,
Right.
like, so we have to just be open to different modalities that are out there. And what works for me may not work for you, but
Mhm.
what works for you may not work for me. But why am I going to judge you if it's working for you?
Right. Exactly.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's my approach to microdosing.
Yeah.
And so, if you go back to the purest form in the 60s and 70s, what helped people get past their frontal lobe in therapy? MDMA. they used MDMA in therapy sessions
Mhm.
back in the 60s and 70s. Why? Because it truly did distract from the frontal lobe, allowing the patients to be vulnerable. Well, you get that vulnerability when you get past this and you
Right.
get down to this.
Right.
And then you're able to talk about those traumas.
Right.
And you're in a vulnerable state with a therapist who knows what the heck they're doing when somebody is in that childlike state.
Right.
So that's why, I mean, it was used back in the day and it was working. And so now they're going to be bringing back MDMA, and they're going to be bringing back these psychostimulants like your shrooms and your LSD, but in microdosing forms.
Right.
All that is simply doing is taking you to a threshold. You're not going to cross the threshold and have hallucinate and feel
Right.
the effects of that high, but it really can help people with anxiety and depression. And if we're able to get somebody to be vulnerable enough and to feel that calmness and that peace, why would we not use that? Why would we not use that to then, in conjunction, right? I'm not here sitting saying, take a pill that's microdose or take a capsule that's microdose with shrooms and then just don't continue the healing process. Like, I'm not sitting there going, hey, or just keep taking these pills every day and it's a cure. But that in conjunction with real reprocessing of the trauma, that's how we heal people.
Right.
And so I'm a huge proponent of that. Why would I say no to medicine? The big book in 12 steps said, they just haven't updated their book. Let's call a spade a spade. That book has not been updated since Bill W. wrote it back in the 1930s.
Right.
So can we all agree that science has made advancements? They say in the book, science has not created a magic pill that will cure addiction. Well, how do we know that if we're not updating the book with science?
Right.
It's like, be open. Science has advanced since the 1930s. So why can't we be open to the belief that scientists are helping with mental illness?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, if you're willing to, I'd like to. I've held the big. I have it in my library, I think, at home, but I've perused it. I have not read it.
I've read it page to page.
Okay.
It's a great
I think
book.
8 different times.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is there must be nuggets of truth, because I
Well,
know
Bill W. was known to use LSD back in the day, and
Okay.
he's the writer of that book.
Okay.
So
But that's what
I
I'm
was
trying
like, even while he was getting sober, he was using LSD.
I'm trying to kind of land on where you are. And I'm guessing, you tell me, that there are aspects in the big book, and we're talking about the Alcoholics Anonymous book written
Correct.
by Bill W. That you do like. And there's
Absolutely.
aspects
I
you
still
don't like.
rely on the principles of the 12 step. As a matter of fact, I think everybody in America, you could easily benefit by many aspects of the big book. So please, if you're a 12 step and big book thumper, I'm not here to trash the program by any means, because there are so many incredible things as far as the principles of recovery and all that stuff that every human being in America could use and benefit from.
Okay.
What I am saying is that book has not been updated to what science advancements have been made, and it should be updated so it's current on trauma recovery and healing.
That's
And
fair.
and all it says is, some of us, we recommend that some of you do seek outside counseling for help, or I'm not saying it word for word, but they'll always throw that back at you. Well, the book says you can seek outside help and outside treatment with doctors and stuff like that. But I'm like, okay, but we need to be speaking more about trauma, because we now know that trauma is the gateway to addiction. So it needs to be more based on that and helping people heal through that.
Yeah.
So to kind of reinterpret it the way I think
But
about it,
traditionalists won't rewrite it, just like traditionalists won't rewrite, the Constitution, right? They hang on to everywhere. But it's the same way, right? Traditionalists in and of itself don't want to go back and rewrite something.
So
they
you're
try
saying
to apply it at all
yeah.
times.
You're saying, basically, the way I interpret it, what you're saying is, hey, here's this book, and it's got wonderful nuggets that are time proven that we want to preserve.
We absolutely.
But it does need some tweaking. It needs to be updated, given the fact that there's been so much advancements in the way of science and medicine and other aspects, that it needs a second edition.
It does need a
For
second
sure.
edition.
Yeah,
It does.
I get that. Okay, that is perspective.
Yeah, when I was in my practicum, again, like what you were saying, regardless if you're in recovery or not, so many women who came in, because I did a lot of family supervisions, and the women that would come in with their children, I would say, get this book, or even go to an Al-Anon meeting, go to an AA meeting, because there's always something that you can pick up. Speaking of trauma, like after when my mom died on November 2020, I was drinking hardcore for like 2 months, a bottle of wine, sometimes 2. Checked myself into rehab at Desert Hope, loved it, loved the program, but after that, I was kind of like, I tried AA and I'm like, I didn't relate to it at all, but when I was there, I was able to process, all the memories from my mom, and because she was my world. So when we talk about the numbing, that's very true.
Yeah. And I tell people too, by the way, for those, those committed to, the 12-step program, I still recommend when I, work with people or people come and ask me for advice and they're struggling, I always recommend that meetings be a piece of your pie at the early stages of recovery to help you build a solid foundation. So again, I actually refer people to go to I don't go to meetings anymore, but I refer people to go to meetings in addition to working with a trauma therapist, in addition to microdosing, in addition to finding that program that works for you, but to not necessarily, but I do warn them that you may feel some people in that program shun you and disparage you because of some of the other modalities that you're doing. Because remember, MAT treatment, medically assisted treatment, there was huge blowback in the AA world when that was established. Huge. People got into verbal fights at AA meetings talking about MAT, medically assisted treatment. Well, MAT is like universally accepted now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Methadone, right? Like helping people get off that. It's like almost universally accepted now, but understanding years back, it was not accepted. So it just it takes a while. So I tell those people at the same time, be careful about what you do share, but I do recommend going to meetings to help you kind of build that solid foundation.
So what I kind of hear is it does provide a really beneficial initial structure.
It does.
Some people in the organization, like any organization, you got some people that are dogmatic.
They are.
And dogma is never a good approach.
It's never, but there are.
I get your perspective now, and it makes a lot more sense.
And you know what? You even mentioned, in conjunction, with microdosing or whatever method you want to use.
You should be working with a trauma therapist. Yes.
Otherwise, that's another form of numbing then.
Right.
Right. Because you're not facing that pain.
So
you're just popping something.
There's a lot of people listening who, when we say microdosing, they don't know what the heck we're talking
So microdosing is just using a small amount of a drug in order to help with whatever effects that you're dealing with. So whether it be anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, microdosing, you're not going to get high on. Now, it's really important to also understand that microdosing for me is going to look different than microdosing for you, just by our chemistry and our body makeup. So obviously your dose of a microdose is going to be different than what mine is. And so really what they do is they'll start you at an extremely low dose to the point where you're probably like, I'm not feeling anything or I'm not getting any benefits. But then they just will slowly increase it to find out where that threshold is for you.
Okay, fair enough. And thanks for explaining that. And then we're talking about mushrooms, which are obviously natural. And then my buddy, he was telling me he was microdosing LSD.
Correct.
And when I heard that, it's like, oh,
whoa.
Yeah, because you're correlating from your perspective to the 1970s and the way LSD was abused back then. It's not the same. It's just psilocybins that are being used.
Yeah. And then I watched a documentary with, I think it was a Swedish scientist that discovered it, and it's like, there's some benefits here. I don't understand this thing. Do you have anything to say about that topic?
About what?
No, the LSD component. Is that part of microdosing?
Yeah. It's all part of it. Okay. Yeah. I'm all in favor for it. So
doctor know what to give you, whether it's a shroom or LSD or something else.
Well, they have the science behind it, and they'll know. What would work. But I mean, there's ketamine clinics, there's all those things. I always just, what I just encourage is that, there's not one thing. Everything is a piece of a pie to healing the mind, body, and soul. And so don't go into something thinking like, oh, finally, listen, the federal government is very, very close to, making psilocybins and microdosing absolutely legal. So MDMA will be back out there, for people to use. So it's coming. But what I don't want people to think is like, cool, I'll just do MDMA every day in order to, in order to live. What I want them to do is go, this is just another piece of the pie that I can use in conjunction to create an entire pie of true peace and happiness. It's not going to be an all solution. It will definitely benefit a large swath of people. And I also don't want there to be any shame around people who do this at the beginning.
Right.
Until it becomes just acceptable in the broader swaths of society.
Yeah.
We can't be shaming people and
Right.
experimenting something, because I can go to an AA meeting today and I guarantee you that there will be people raising their hands if they've relapsed in the last 24 hours. Okay. So I can, I can sit there and look at these folks and say, well, okay, well, your program's not working either. Like, look at all these people who are collecting a white chip today who've been in the AA rooms for 5 years and they keep collecting a white chip.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to shame the AA program for that, just as like those people shouldn't shame somebody for then trying a different modality to help them heal from theirs.
And at the end of the day, nobody needs to know you're taking it.
No, but we
Right?
also shouldn't be shameful in not being able to speak about it openly,
Yeah,
right? And so that's the reason why I don't agree with the whole anonymous approach either.
Yeah.
Anonymity is
True.
rooted in shame.
Yeah, that's true.
Anonymity is rooted in shame. Why would we need to be anonymous then if there wasn't any shame or stigma around it?
But I think some people are like when we talk about spectrum, some people are not ready to, talk openly.
Yeah.
Because of shame.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think
Because
I
if
get
there
your
wasn't
point.
any societal shame around it, then
Yeah.
we should be
We'd be
open
talking
enough.
about
So
it.
that's why generational trauma
Yeah.
is so wicked, because your generation, right, told our generation, don't air your dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Don't cry over spilled milk. I'll give you something to cry about. That is generational trauma in saying it is shameful to be vulnerable. It is shameful to tell people you're depressed. It is bad. You're a bad thing. That's why they created the anonymity part of Alcoholics Anonymous, was because people thought that they would be fired from their jobs if they said if they had a trouble drinking, and so we're essentially telling people, don't share people that you're hurting or that you're having having a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why I always recover out loud, and to let other people know, like, no, man, I've been struggling too, or, I've had this issue too, but look at my life and I'm successful and I have these great things, but dude, I was doing that too.
Yeah. Recover out loud. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's basically Phil's motto. Recover out loud.
Yeah.
Yep.
But-
Fasto.
Yeah.
Recover out loud. True.
That's what they were doing last night. We had a great time.
Yeah.
Fun place.
Okay, so so many dimensions. We've
So
talked about
many.
microdosing, and that is taking very small doses of things that the words themselves might be triggering, but LSD or mushrooms, that kind of thing. I haven't
Ketamine.
done that, but I have friends that have that swear by it in terms of its benefits. And I think that it's important to just let the science go forward. Let the
Correct.
studies go forward.
Correct.
Let's turn the dial down on judgments and shame.
Absolutely.
And let's recover out loud, I guess. That's what we're doing in this podcast.
That's
We're talking
exactly
about
what we're
all this stuff.
Correct. So that people at home who have suffered trauma, and trauma looks different for every single person, right? We're doing this podcast to let that person know who hasn't shared their trauma because of what? Shame.
Yeah.
So they're anonymous with it, right?
Right.
They're essentially anonymous,
Right.
And what we're telling them is that is actually going to kill you.
Yeah.
Holding it in will kill you.
Absolutely.
You
it
know,
will.
it's
It will stay
fascinating to
with me.
just see in the last 20 years. How long has Nicole been gone?
28.
28. Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
crazy?
Wow. In just 28 years with domestic violence, Tanya's family, and it's been a privilege to have somewhat of a front row seat to watch this, but the whole world's watched this. The domestic violence was just talk about shame, talk about shutting down the conversation.
Well, victim shaming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now people are talking
Why are
about
they
it.
staying with that person who's hurting them? Yeah, because they suffered trauma early stages of their life.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There's been a transition, and your family has led the charge, but it's cool to see this awakening. I don't know what else to call it.
Well, just like, with mental health issues, we're finally talking about it.
Yeah.
Domestic violence back in the day, it's like, okay, you made your bed, sleep in it, right?
Right.
Sweep it underneath the
We're
carpet.
able to speak about it without fear of retaliation.
Exactly. There's organizations, there's people now, and it always takes one person, to make a shift. And, unfortunately it was my sister. Believe me, I would rather have her here than do my advocacy, but at least we're talking about it,
Right.
and lives are being saved.
Yeah. And there's I heard something about you mentioned art and the things that you're developing. I heard recently that somebody helps trauma survivors through pets and horses.
Uh-huh.
that
Equine
kind of
therapy?
thing.
Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, it's
Yeah.
hugely
Very
healing.
healing.
Yeah. Is that something you're involved with? Is that something?
I'm not involved with it, but I definitely equine therapy is really great at actually getting men who are very closed off to talk therapy. Again, equine therapy is experiential therapy, which is
Uh-huh.
why experiential therapy is 80% times better or
Mhm.
80% better than talk therapy, because not everybody will sit down with a talk therapist and be vulnerable. But equine therapy, just standing in front of a horse, is a true mirror reflection of you. They can feel your heartbeat. They
Yeah.
can feel your anxiety. They can feel if you're scared. They can feel if you're angry, or they'll feel if you're tired. And they will reflect that
Yep.
because,
Mm.
horses are kind of like in that survival mode. They're all they're
Yeah.
all right here.
Uh,
And so they'll be able to sense that. And they can break down a grown man who's suffered a lot of PTSD in a matter of minutes and
You
get
know,
that
They
person
use
to
it
feel
it's
They use it a
vulnerable.
lot with
true.
autism too.
Yes.
I'm a scuba diver, and sharks sense what if
Mhm.
you're not nervous, they will run from you. Literally, they will scatter. My daughter will literally chase sharks. I mean,
I love sharks.
it's kind of funny. My point is that they have an organ. They've actually identified the nervous system, the organ where they can sense your heart rate. They can monitor your heart rate. And I didn't know it extended to other animals,
Oh,
but
animals
Oh,
can.
definitely with
Dogs.
horses.
oh, for sure.
Oh, dog.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess what's kind of evolving out of this conversation is that there's a menu of treatments, and there's
Yes.
not a ones you don't eat a hamburger every day. There's a menu for trauma recovery.
Mhm.
The menu's getting more and more interesting, more and more effective, more and more colorful, I guess.
Yeah.
From the black and white thinking of the past. And turn off the shame and the judgmental nonsense,
Mhm.
and look at the menu and explore and find the solutions, find the things on the menu that make sense for you.
For you.
Yeah, the next time you go to a
Right.
restaurant, do you all order the same thing? No,
Never.
you don't order the same thing. The
I
whole
do.
table, no, whole table doesn't order the same thing,
Right.
right? Like, okay, this person's choosing this. Now everybody has to eat that.
Right.
Right.
No, you choose what is flavorful and makes you feel good and, nourishes your body. And it's a great
Exactly.
analogy to use. But at the same time, what are the worst meals to go to when we are force fed to eat something that we don't want to, which is usually a banquet hall, right?
Right.
Nobody likes that.
Yep.
Nobody, because we're being forced to eat something we don't want to eat. That's not going to work for our bodies or work for our
Mhm.
choice. Some people have an allergic reaction to some foods. We're going to
Right.
force them to keep eating
Eating
that
it.
because it worked
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Me eating these foods worked for me. Now you eat it, kid, even though you're allergic to it. Hell no, we wouldn't do that to somebody.
One size does not
No,
fit all.
it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a kind of I have a personal philosophy. It's Aristotle, and I added a little thing: egos, logos, pathos, and duos. Egos is when you're navigating through something, is it ethical? Pathos is, does it emotionally feel right? Logos, does it make sense? And duos, have I looked at both sides of the thing? But I came across another term just real recently. I think it's theos. It's
Mhm.
basically, what's your ultimate goal? What's your North Star? Where are you going? So I kind of want to ask you, Brandon, what's kind of you've brought some really fantastic new dimensions to this whole
Mhm.
conversation. What's kind of your ultimate I don't want to say end game, because that makes it sound like you're done.
Yeah.
North Star. What's your North Star?
But what's kind of your North Star? Where's kind of the overall direction that you see this all these things going?
Right. So my North Star would be continue to create Art of Our Soul locations. A few more. I would love to open up a few more. And because I've seen it help people in real time. And I don't want that to just be in Arizona. Like, why should it just be in Arizona? I want to give an opportunity to another trauma
Mhm.
survivor to run another Art of Our Soul to help other people. I can't be the only healer
Right.
at Art of Our Soul, right? Other trauma survivors are also healers, and they can help heal other people. So it'll always be peer based. And I think my North Star is I would love to open up a true healing center that has a shaman in-house, a shaman or two in-house that does the Wim Hof method. So a lot of ice baths and laser therapy to help with our fight or flight responses.
Mhm.
I want to open up a healing center that uses modalities like microdosing, that things that are not reimbursed by insurance. I want to open up a healing center and hopefully be connected to, some very financial fluid people
Mhm.
who can help fund it at the beginning, who believes in the trauma healing approach, because insurance companies will take decades to catch up to what actually is working in science.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And so I want to open up a healing center, like a Raven Center, where people can come and they can practice shamanism and do true inner child healing work from their
And did I
Love that.
hear you said something about laser?
whether you can go to laser therapies, where you sit in the infrared saunas,
Yeah.
and it's really
Okay.
drenching you of those toxins. That's another piece of a pie.
Mhm.
Doing ice baths, getting into the Wim Hof method, which is fight or flight response.
Uh-huh.
It's 3-minute ice baths in like 40 degree 40-degree water. Your body, when you get in it, is wanting to get the hell out.
Yeah.
But it's
Yes.
being able to do deep breath work
Yeah.
in order to calm your body and really be able to control the fear aspect of your mind,
Mhm.
right? And learning all those techniques and doing shamanism. And so I want that to be all at a healing center.
Interesting.
I did. What's that? When you go into, when you go into a chamber, what's it called?
Oh, hyperbaric chambers.
Yes.
Yes.
No,
And I
not
want,
hyperbaric, but that's a good
I
one
love
too.
hyperbaric
That's really
chambers.
good for people with like fibromyalgia too.
Right.
A lot of health benefits, but it's not cool sculpting. It's, oh God, it's not an ice bath, but it's like a dry ice, and it's like negative 280 or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah. Where
What's
you
it
walk
called?
into the booth.
Yeah. What's it called?
I'll think of it.
Oh my gosh.
I know I'm going to.
Your body wants to get out. You don't know cold. But
Well, I
when
want to create a healing center on experiential therapy only.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everything is an experience to help the mind, body, and soul heal.
Uh-huh. So healing centers. You want to start healing centers and make these various things on the menu we are just talking about
Mhm.
But
more
I want
accessible.
correct, and I want it to be a foundation so that we can accept donations. I want to run it as a nonprofit so that we can get billionaires to help fund it as write-offs, so
Yeah.
that we can
Yeah.
give this not to the rich, to the underserved.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you
So,
for that.
so the wealthy people can do cash pay, but these healing centers that I would love to, I would love for Spirit to guide me in this direction, because I would love to open up healing centers, again, a nonprofit base, so that we can accept donations, and all of that money would go and allow people in underserved, people who do not have access to that kind of health insurance,
Yeah.
or do not have that kind of cash flow to be able to pay for that. Because these modalities, unfortunately, are not, a lot of them are backed by insurance companies, and it's cash pay.
Right.
Well, underserved communities can't afford that, but why should they be left out of the trauma healing?
Right.
Because a
Mhm.
lot of those folks have also suffered early childhood trauma, and they're passing that trauma down, right?
Mhm.
And so if that generational trauma is being passed down, you were in San Quentin, you saw a lot of those people committing
Yeah.
those crimes. That's all trauma based, right? Because
Yeah.
they've experienced trauma.
Mhm.
So I'm of the belief, if we want to end those vicious crimes, and we have to be able to help those in underserved communities as well,
Yes.
be able to have access to this, well, through a foundation, we would be able to fund that so they could come for free.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I'll tell you,
beautiful.
folks, if you
Yeah.
want to turn down drugs and violent crime and rape and murder, go to trauma.
Mhm.
It's all based in
That's
trauma.
it's all
Mhm.
based in trauma. And I say that having sat in jails and prisons,
Right.
talking to the people, and
Well, to even perpetrators,
And-
batterers. I mean, my
And
God.
what happens is society starts to point the finger at these poor neighborhoods. Look at Compton, look at these places, they're crime ridden. Yeah, but you look at the resources that are available to them, trauma's happening to those neighborhoods,
Mhm.
and they don't have the funding in order to be given access to real reprocessing trauma healing
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So what the hell do we expect to have happen?
Yeah.
So I tell these rich neighborhoods in which I grew up, stop pointing the finger, get out your damn checkbook and start writing checks to help these underserved communities have access to the same modalities that you and your children have access to.
Mhm.
yeah, and it's what's interesting, these healing centers don't even exist yet really
Mm-mm.
in
No.
the rich neighborhoods, more or less the poor neighborhoods.
No, that's why I want to create it.
Yeah, and I'll
We-
tell you, having worked in South Central in some of my jobs, the vast majority of those neighborhoods are folks that would give you the shirt off their back.
Yeah.
They were the most wonderful people you'd ever imagine.
And by the way, there's a lot of trauma in wealthy neighborhoods.
Oh
so,
my
God.
They just have more money. No, they just have more money to make their house look prettier. Like they have, they just have more art. They have more money to be like, but look how pretty we are because we can afford that gold curtain.
Brandon, it's
That
just a
is
great way to
sad.
be miserable.
It is. No, it's so
That's all it
true.
is. It's a great way to be
That is so
miserable.
true.
Oh.
Speaking of centers, we have wellness centers, right? Here in Orange County. So anyway, just wanting to do some book signings and wellness centers.
Yeah.
all of them are like Botox,
Yeah.
liposuction.
No.
But
So,
there's truly there's one wellness center that I really advocate for. It's in San Diego. It's called Beauty Clinic. And they do like, trauma healing. They do
Yeah.
lymphatic massages for women of cancer and men also. But here in Orange County, our wellness centers, they're not healing centers. They're like, hey, I need to go get Botox or
Well,
fillers.
again, they're slapping band-aids on the cosmetics
exactly.
and the appearance rather than, again, going to the heart
Going
of the
into the
issue.
trauma.
yeah. So if you've got a billionaire or like, somebody worth a lot of money who's listening to this podcast and you love what we're talking about, like let's create a healing center that's built on a foundation and a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and that way we can accept donations from people around the country, wealthy people, and they can use it as tax write-offs. But
For sure.
we will be able to help provide these modalities and new sciences to help people heal from their trauma. And that's what I would love to manifest.
If you
Yeah.
think about it, I mean, domestic violence victims, they leave with nothing.
That's right.
The
So
money's
why
being
should they not
controlled,
have
right?
access to something like a shaman and microdosing
Yeah.
and, really spiritual healing in combination? So why shouldn't they have access to that? And why should only the wealthy be able to afford
Yeah.
to afford these things?
Yeah.
And while I am privileged enough to be able to pay for it, I can I want to be able to do something with it. Like now that I have the knowledge and the experience of working with a shaman and doing those things. And I'm grateful and blessed that I can afford to pay for each and individual session. But I also want to be able to give that same healing aspect to people who cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You see
yeah.
the benefit of it.
Okay, so everything you've said is not just resonated, it's been like full color, really wonderful. But there's one thing I want to kind of go back, and like we did with the conversation about whatever it was that we kind of flushed out, it made a lot more sense, is in prison, I call it the dynamic duo. Because there's not a lot of resources. It's volunteers going in, and we call it the dynamic duo. And one is sitting in the fire, and that's really kind of, it's not even, I wouldn't even call it talk therapy. It's more talking, opening up. I've saw one guy, you see some stories there, like for example, one guy admitted for the very first time that he was his existence was the product of a rape. He didn't know his father because his mother was
And how
raped.
how traumatic is
Yeah,
that?
and he said it for the very first time out loud, and you could see the relief because instead of everybody in the room screaming and saying, "I get away from this guy," and shunning him, they all just wanted to
Love
the
him.
guy and give the guy a
Yeah.
hug.
Oh,
And it was one of those magic moments where you saw this transformation, that you saw that it wasn't as horrible as he thought it was to admit it, because everybody had empathy
Yeah.
and love for the guy.
Correct.
So that's called sitting in the fire, those horrible conversations. The other one is grounding, which is the term given to meditation, because meditation sounds religious to some people. And
right.
I personally don't have a problem with the term meditation, but
No,
I
think it's
wanted
great.
to kind of flush those two issues out, because you said something about talk therapy, and I think we both agree, I think we do, that
Yeah.
talking about it is essential.
I'm a huge fan of
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
therapy in
Yeah.
conjunction with using a modality that gets you past frontal lobe. Talk therapy is all frontal lobe. That's not where
Right.
the traumatic memory is. This is where we rationalize and try to make sense of everything.
Right.
So that's talk therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do another modality in conjunction with talk therapy that gets you back here.
I love it. What you're talking about really is you're talking about addressing the spectrum of issues rather than being unduly centrist on one issue.
Right.
Okay, so we're on the same page with talk therapy. It's good, but don't neglect the other stuff. But we haven't talked about meditation and deep breathing yet.
Well, that's what I do in my shaman sessions.
Okay,
So
so-
I'm able to get
yeah.
past. So while some people use ayahuasca or they'll use, a psychedelic in order to get you past here,
Right.
okay,
Uh-huh.
and down here is because a lot of people are so freaking closed
Yeah.
off to not getting back there that they'll never get back there without the use of a psychedelic or MDMA,
Okay.
right? I don't have to. I can do deep breath work. So with my shaman, at the beginning, it took me about 30 or 35 minutes of breath work in order to finally drop in, as what we say. And when I mean drop in, it means I've gotten now past the frontal lobe. And he goes, "Brandon, what are you seeing?" And I'm able to see my childhood and almost like a film straight. And he goes, "What are you seeing?" And I'm like, in one instance, I was crouched. The most recent one, I was crouched in my bedroom with my hands kind of like this over my head. And I was screaming, "Make it stop, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop." And he goes, "Brandon, what's happening?" And I said, "I'm in my bedroom, make it stop." And I'm screaming as if I'm a child, "Make it stop, make it stop." He goes, "What's happening?" I said, "My parents, they're fighting in the hallway. They're fighting in the hallway. Make it stop, make it stop, make it stop." right? And he goes, go over, will you walk over to him? So I walked over to my inner child, little B, in the
Mhm.
corner of the room. And he goes, what's happening? And I said, he's looking up at me. And my shaman goes, okay, well, extend your hand to him. Will he take your hand? And I was like, yeah, he's taking my hand. He goes, good. Lead him out and walk out of that bedroom and walk out of the house, right? Essentially rescuing my inner child to let him know that you're safe now.
Mhm.
I got you now, right? So through deep breath work, I'm actually able to drop in 7 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes now.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's a breath technique. It's like a double in my nose, long exhale out. And I can actually feel the effects of being high. Like my body goes truly freaking numb. Like I can experience a true high and then I drop in.
Wow. Okay.
Hmm.
I think
And I don't meditate. And by the way, like I should also tell people, I have never done yoga. I have never meditated once in my life before I began shamanism.
okay. So we're
So I
talking
just
the same
did deep. Yeah. So
This
I
is
just
all
do.
new.
I'm calling it grounding. You're
Yeah.
calling it work with your shaman.
Right. My shaman. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in my, for those watching the video, my book, Post-Traumatic Thriving, I got a page on 7, and it's the human brain and trauma. And the way I describe it, I just want to see if we're on the same page. I think we are.
Mhm.
There's the reptilian brain
Correct.
at the base of the brain, the mammal brain, which is midbrain, and the human brain on the outer brain.
Correct.
We're talking the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Phew, I'd have to rewrite the book.
No, we're trying. No, it's the exact same thing.
Pages.
And when I say we store those traumatic memories deep in here,
Mhm.
that's in your book.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
so
we have to be able to access that
Yeah.
because consciously we're not going to remember that. It's the way our bodies are wired, right? We don't want to remember anything that causes us pain. So what do? We bury it down deep inside so we don't remember it.
Yeah.
The problem is it's still there and the energy is still within our bodies. And so as adults, we don't understand why we're making poor life decisions and why we keep having a bad pick or why we're acting or
Right.
behaving a certain
Mhm.
way. It's because our wires have been crossed and we need to rewire. But the only way to
Exactly.
rewire is to go back
Yeah.
down. So
Yeah.
let's
Let me explain it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. The way I think of it, which I think we're saying the same thing, is right now we're using our human brains.
Correct.
You know,
Right.
we have logic and
Right.
conversation and all of this awareness that's
Right.
typical to the human experience. Just below that is the mammal brain, where we have the emotions that, animals have emotions,
Right.
obviously, and so forth. But there's something unique about humans that makes us very distinctly human. That's the human brain. But at the base of the brain is the amygdala, and that's the
It's the
reptilian
amygdala.
brain. It's
Mhm.
very,
Correct.
it's very reactionary.
Yes.
So when you go through a trauma, your human brain essentially turns off, and your
Correct.
reptilian brain turns on. It's
Mhm.
instinct. It's
Yep.
fight, flight,
Fight or
freeze.
flight.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
And that's where the memories of the trauma are restored.
Correct.
And so in processing trauma, we have to basically take those memories out of the reptilian brain where those memories are distorted
Mhm.
and work them through the mammal brain and the human brain.
Right.
Yep.
Are we
Yeah.
We're there.
Yep.
boom.
And
Yeah.
so my shaman through deep breath work allows me to get back to the amygdala,
Yeah.
right? And then what they had did at the very beginning for about a year and a few months,
Mhm.
he would give those notes in session to my trauma talk therapist,
Mhm.
and we'd be able to use
That's
the
amazing.
frontal lobe,
The frontal
What a
lobe,
human
the
great
human
brain,
partnership.
what I call
in
the
order
human brain.
to understand
Yeah.
and understand what happened, but also be able to, more in a human aspect, be able to
Mhm.
go, okay, but this is what I can do now.
Yeah.
That's a great partnership that she
It's huge.
created.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But EMDR does the same thing,
yeah.
right? So we're getting back to lower,
Mhm.
to the amygdala, right? So
Right.
that EMDR is a modality that gets past this to this.
Yeah, and when we say
Mhm.
amygdala, for those who are listening, we're talking about the reptilian brain at the it's at the
The
it's
base,
actually
base of
the lower-
located right at the spine,
Right.
at the base of the
And
brain.
in shamanism, the belief is that the traumatic energy is stored in the lower part of your spine.
That's fascinating because modern science just figured that out, and it sounds like shamanism figured it out, just like Hinduism figured out
Yeah.
meditation hundreds or thousands of years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting sometimes if you're having a lot of lower back pain. What's one of the root causes of pain?
And I always thought it was
What's one
tight
of the
hamstring.
root body causes of pain with all people?
Right.
Yeah.
Lower back pain, is it
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
How
I just
many-
thought it was
And
tight
if you and what
hamstrings.
is the percentage? You're the doctor here. What's the percentages of people who experience trauma in their life?
Well, by college age, it's 66 to 85% of us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you got up to 85% of us that have experienced trauma. How many of you think those people have actually done the reprocessing work to process that traumatic energy?
Very few.
Very few.
Very, very few. And what is one of the most common ailments in our world? Lower back pain.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily because people aren't stretching.
Yeah. And if you sit down with a medical doctor,
Hey, I'm calling to
All right. But then they're like, hey, I'm going to go to the
I
chiropractor,
got
which could work, right? But
I
I'm
got
going to go to the
something
chiropractor. But you keep going back to that chiropractor for the quick fix.
Yeah.
yeah, well, you
Huh.
know, a lot of
I don't know. I'm
medicine-
just saying this to give you thought.
No, I agree with you more. A lot of modern medicine, and I'm a believer in modern medicine, and
Hugely.
but
Yeah.
a lot of it's slapping band-aids. And if you have a real conversation with a medical doctor who is insightful, they will readily admit that a lot of what they're treating are they're slapping band-aids, but the real root of the problem is unresolved trauma, particularly
Correct.
what's heart-wrenching out of these end-of-life stories where people are just kind of in the last chapter
Yeah.
and they've got this garbage they've never processed.
And then they let it all out.
Yeah. And that's the root core of
Their ailment.
of
Yeah.
their
Cancers.
ailment. Yes,
You think
exactly.
cancers.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
you really start to go down that route. And, you know, how are people getting cancer if it doesn't come in your family? You know, I would always say that the toxicity of the trauma and the resentment and the
Mhm.
hurt and the pain of living in the body, it causes so much to our body system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holding all that in.
Yeah.
Poison.
Correct. I'm a true
Mhm.
believer that is the root cause of a lot of our issues.
You know, I always used to explain to people like stress. Remember the travelers group, the big red umbrella, and then all the subsidiaries underneath? I always said, okay, the red umbrella is stress with all, you know, the physical COPD, cancer, etc. Right? Really, the red umbrella is trauma. And then under that are all the ailments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just switching up my language.
Well, I don't want to none of us want to oversimplify things, but if we will change the conversation in this country and in this planet and get at this underlying trauma
Mhm.
thing
Yep.
and make it a part of discussion from an early age, that when this stuff happens,
Yeah.
and it will happen,
Mhm.
It's
Um,
it's almost a guaranteed right of this life
Yeah.
that
oh,
it will
is
happen.
100 by
Will happen.
by my age is 100%. I don't
Yeah.
know anybody in my age group that hasn't, you know,
Experience something.
been slammed with some kind of traumatic thing.
Mhm.
But by college age, you're already usually there.
Yeah.
But if we make this conversation more of a conversation from childhood, that here's what we do in terms of breathing, in terms of
Mhm.
talking with, you know, sexual predators get away with their bullshit because of the shame that their victims go through. And a lot of times even the parents and the clergy of these kids shut down the conversation. They don't call the
Correct. Mhm.
police. They think they can handle it on their own by shutting it down.
Yep.
That's all garbage.
Right.
Yep.
Garbage
Yep.
thinking. And you see so many organizations, big organization. We're talking the Olympics. We're talking about Boy Scouts, hundreds of millions,
Mhm.
billions of dollars in settlements to resolve the lawsuits from unresolved trauma from sexual predators
Mhm.
who operated successfully for decades because nobody would talk about the problem.
Right.
Like
It pisses me off.
Unless
Yeah,
it's like
it's
20,
the
30 years
truth.
later. You
And
know?
they know that. It's also the reason why the statistics that childhood predators are not strangers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're folks who have earned the trust of family members,
Mhm.
you know, and hold rank within that circle, and they
Mhm.
abuse somebody within that circle.
Yeah.
Well, it happened
There's
to
a
you.
reason why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what happened to me. I mean, these
Mhm.
were all people who had access to me in that circle, right? So
Ask you a question. You know, you were essentially abused, as the politest term to use, by a bunch of adult sexual predators. Do you think there's a cure for that? Because that's a question that goes on in prison quite a bit.
it is. Can you rewire? Do I have hope, or do I have belief that you can rewire the brain of a sexual predator?
Yeah.
No.
Mhm.
Oh God, this is going to sound inhumane for a lot of folks, but I mean, if you just cut off the testicles that don't allow the testosterone to build, then maybe they won't have the sexual urge to act out.
Right.
Mm.
Because I think it is a sexual compulsion. In that way, I don't know enough of the science, but this is just my personal belief because I'm not a doctor and I would never claim to be. Um, but I do believe that if you cut off the sexual drive of somebody, that I don't believe that they would. That's my belief.
Yeah.
Um, Do I believe that they were traumatized? Yes, absolutely. I think that child predators were also preyed upon
Mhm.
and act out in that way. But I don't want this to go down to the conversation of the stigma of that because I was sexually abused, that I will become a child sex predator. Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, and nor do I even want to open that discussion because it's simply not true.
Yeah.
You know, just because I was sexually abused and I am a gay man, I don't need to have a stigma about me that I'm going to sexually abuse another
Yeah.
Right.
child. And I think that's where we have gone in society in thinking that gay people exist because they were sexually abused. And yes, there are large swaths of this country, and especially of religious belief, who say that about gay people.
Mhm.
They say that you're only gay because you were sexually abused and you are a sexual predator, which is why there are far right religious, there are far religious beliefs out there
Right.
that gay people are sexual predators, and it's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't
Thank
you?
you for
Yeah,
clarifying
I
that
couldn't
too
agree
for
more with
people.
you. Don't you think that well, one thing I talk about quite often is there's a website, gaychurch.org, where a
Mhm.
lot of religions are saying being gay is totally normal.
Correct.
And
Mhm.
let's get real here. Let's grow up here
Right.
and let's stop this nonsense.
Right.
But there are the far right, as you described, that extreme right that
Mhm.
is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where they're creating laws in Florida saying
Yeah.
that you can't say gay. So how about that? I mean, what is that?
Seriously.
Oh,
Yeah,
Seriously.
type in "say gay" on
wow.
Google. Oh yeah,
Okay.
Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida, they're banning saying gay in schools.
Ah, gee.
Oh, I just got
Like, you want to
chills.
talk about traumatizing a new generation of youth. Well, congratulations, Florida. That's why mental health. I mean, I just look at this. Addiction treatment centers are just going to be in business forever because we constantly are traumatizing children that we're like, now you can't wear anything that's rainbow colored to school because that's a symbol of being
Oh my
gay. And
God.
you can't say gay in schools.
I
You
mean, I'm
can't do those
63
things.
years old and I figured that one out.
I mean,
Golly. Well,
Amazing.
for the record, being gay is totally normal. It's a percentage of
Yeah.
our population, and they
and
should
we
cut.
did not choose to be this
Well,
way.
and not that there's anything, detrimental about that position. I don't want to say choice. I don't know that it is a choice.
No, it was not a choice, and I am
Yeah,
gay.
yeah.
I will put a
I'm
definitive
just saying,
stamp on that.
everybody should be
Yeah.
invited to the barbecue. And the notion
Yeah.
that gay people are predators is utter
Yeah,
nonsense.
that's
But that
nonsense.
stigma has been
But
around.
so with some people, you're right, it does. I mean, I'm here in California, and I don't see a lot of that anymore.
Well, I
But
have been a news anchor in Atlanta, Georgia. So
Mhm,
I've lived in the South.
mhm.
I've been in Boston, I've been in Hartford, New York City, Arizona, fairly conservative,
Mhm.
and Los Angeles. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been around this country. I know
yeah.
some beliefs.
Do you think
Mhm.
things are getting better for the gay community in terms of people just kind of like acceptance and
Yeah, I do. And now it's, and then there's, those who, the trans community, they're the
Mhm.
ones getting beat up a lot
Mhm.
right now. And I think it's really important that we understand that, we stand by those people as well. And so, the
Yeah.
trans community right now is getting the brunt of a lot of the abuse right now.
Mhm.
I think we're finally to the point. I mean, remember how they said gay marriage was going to be the end of the family, the end of the family structure in
yeah,
America, that it was going to doom all families. It's
yeah.
just the total opposite. I actually think that if you are a gay couple and you are choosing to go through do you understand what it takes to be a gay parent to get a child, and not through even adoption, but through artificial insemination and all those things? Like,
Mm,
you are really making a choice that you want to raise a child. Well, how beautiful is that?
Yeah.
mhm.
You know that child is going to be loved upon because it was not done by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you look at how many accidents are made by straight people, and they don't love on
Yes.
that child,
Yeah.
and they abuse that child,
Mhm.
and I have seen firsthand how in a loving home, how these children are growing up to be incredible people. And what I will say to those folks who thought that gay marriage was going to be the end of society as we know it, has society ended? No, it has not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
I think I said it earlier in maybe stage 1 or stage 2, I can't remember, where I have 3 friends of mine who they're gay couples, and they all have children. And I'm telling you, these kids are beautiful. They are happy.
They're
They are
loved.
joyful. They're creative. Oh my goodness. Like, I mean, I just love those kids.
Well, I have 3 years ago, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with some buddies, and one of my buddies is gay, and we were going up there, and we were all kind of sharing our stories going up the mountain. We had a lot of time, and I kind of laughed because I said, "Dude, your relationship with your partner outlasted my marriage." So,
Right?
is more successful.
I mean, but that's like, I mean, I laugh at it, even
It's
though
so
we shouldn't be laughing at
so
it. But I
true.
mean, you just look, I mean, but honestly, and I always say that I never talk politics with people ever, but you just look at some people and you're like, okay, but you keep using your argument against me getting married is the sanctity of marriage. Like marriage is so sacred that you can't allow a gay person to get married. So the sanctity of marriage, but I'm like, dude, how many times have you been married? 5 times?
Right.
So where was the sanctity in wife number 1? Where was the sanctity of wife number 2, Newt Gingrich? But you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
It's
Like these
so
are the same people
true.
who rail against gay people because of the sanctity of marriage and God. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what did God think about your 5 marriages? Like, what
Right.
is that?
Exactly.
No, I get it. I get it.
It's like,
16
if there's one
days.
thing we can eradicate, I think, in society, if there was one thing that we just do a magic wand, it would be hypocrisy.
Yes.
Amen to that,
Whole
brother.
bunch of
Yeah.
hypocrisy.
Just everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Let's just remove hypocrisy from
Yeah.
everything. And I think we'd be fine.
Absolutely. So much hypocrisy.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Wow,
my
what a
gosh.
great conversation. So,
That was great.
we've covered art, we've covered the microdosing, we've covered the shaman. I keep
Shaman.
shaman.
No R's in shamans.
Sorry. I guess I really need to meet Toby. I guess that's
You squeezed the charm in, Randy.
sorry. It is a new
Yeah.
that is a new topic. But
I wonder
I'm
if he
excited
would
about
do it. I
exploring
wonder if he would even do an interview because he is very like he's so spiritual in his practice. He just he's always he said this to me. He goes, it really got me to, and I will share this because I think this might help a lot of your listeners.
Yeah.
I harbored a lot of resentment towards my parents. I think, I think every child has some little bit of resentment towards their parents at some point in their life, maybe a little bit, but we have different levels of extreme. I had a lot. And it was up until recently that I was able to let go of all that resentment and allowed me to now have a relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest, but it's it's at least something
something.
because I harbor no more resentment. I'll tell you why. I have fully bought into this belief that I chose my parents before my soul entered this lifetime. I chose them for the lessons, good and bad, that they would teach me so that my soul could live its purpose into what I'm doing now. So I am asked, Brandon, do you love the life you have today? I love this life I have today. Yes. Then I need to give thanks to the parents who raised me because without that experience, I would not have created this life I have today.
That's beautiful.
And that is very true. So I truly believe and I take the responsibility that I chose my parents. My soul did before I entered this world for the lessons, good and bad, that they would teach me so that I could live my life's purpose. And I love my life's purpose today. So why would I regret the parents that I have?
Yeah.
I love that. Can I ask a question about
Beautiful.
Toby? And without you disclosing, share if you want. Has he experienced trauma himself?
Huge.
Huge. Okay.
And as a matter of fact, Toby has told me, and he looked at me and he goes, Brandon, I'm going to share something with you because he says he has told me, he goes, you are a healer in what you are doing and what you do. And he says, Brandon, those of us who suffer early childhood trauma and heal from it can go on to be the world's best healers. But not everyone heals from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that I look at trauma very differently now. I don't regret the trauma that I went through in my early childhood. I have no anger at it or resentment that I went through it. Because trauma, I believe, is an opportunity given to us to heal from it so that our soul can find out what our life's purpose is in helping others. We're born into this world with a core wounding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said
We have to be given opportunities to heal from something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't look at trauma as a bad thing. So as long as we heal from it, it feels awful going through it.
Yeah.
And I know the pain, trust me, I've suffered a lot of trauma in my lifetime. It hurts. It hurts a lot. And it can be a dark cloud for years. But if we heal from it, it can be the most beautiful blessing in our lifetime.
You said early on in one of the interviews that you said, because I always say hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. And healed people heal people.
Yep. Healed people heal people.
The
Love
opposite
that.
must be true.
Yep. I love that.
What I really is resonating with me is, and maybe I'm including myself here. Some of our healing is is deeper than others, and your healing seems to have gone really
Real
deep.
deep.
Very.
You know,
Mhm.
and that's what kind of comes through. And I'm so excited about starting exploring a whole bunch of new things as as a result of our conversation. You know, Toby and that whole thing, the microdosing thing. I don't know that I'll do it, but I want to learn about it.
Yeah.
Right.
The art avenue that you've gone is fascinating, particularly that it's abstract art because I can't draw a
Get on his
stick man.
get on his
It's
Instagram.
all
There's
over
so many
Instagram.
beautiful pieces
Yeah.
on there. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And like our producer had said before, where it's like, my God, it's like going to the Sawdust Festival here in Laguna or an art gallery in
Some
Newport
of them are
Beach.
way better.
They're
Some of my
amazing.
clients who have like, I had a girl who was just out of detox 3 hours before they shuttled her over, and she was shaking. I mean, fentanyl, by the way, detox.
Oh wow. That's serious.
It was very, and this was an extreme case. And I looked at the therapist and I was like, she could be good. She goes, she just got out of detox 3 hours ago. So I went
Wow.
over to her and I looked at her. I said, I know you're uncomfortable right now, and I know you're going through a lot of pain. Um, but I got you because I've been you,
Mhm.
and we're gonna get through this class together. I started playing the music, and by the end of class, her hand wasn't shaking anymore.
Mm.
She came back the next week, which was this last week. She looked like a whole new
Oh,
person.
that's so cool.
And what's crazy, her art was the best art that entire week of that class.
Really?
Her artwork. She's like an artist. And I'm like, you realize you're an artist? She goes, no, I didn't realize. I was like, your artwork is like blowing my mind.
That's
Sometimes
crazy.
their artwork ends up turning out better than my instruction piece. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's
That's
so
crazy.
nice. I love that. Complete transformation.
And that's the other thing that I always tell people. We don't do any detailed art. We don't paint by numbers. We don't draw trees. We don't draw faces. No, because people who are, especially addicts are very self-critical, and it'll actually be traumatic for them if we do that, because they'll be like, this looks like crap. This is terrible. I'm a horrible artist. See, I knew I couldn't do it. And then it would spin out of control and be a very negative experience.
Yeah.
But in the abstract way that we do it, everything just naturally becomes really pretty and
Yeah.
really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I really do set them up for success. I've never had one experience where somebody's like, this is awful.
Yeah.
Because I hated art therapy. We were talking about that
Stop.
earlier. Oh my
In the
gosh.
clinical approach to clinical
The
art
clinical
therapy.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I would get anxiety. I mean, I'm even getting sweaty hands right now because you compare yourself to other
To
people.
other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
And
my sister, my mom, they're beautiful artists. My mom painted, like every painting in my home it was done by my mom. And Dominique, phenomenal artist. So here I am in art therapy going, I can't do this. I mean, literally, I would start crying.
right, because you were
Anxiety.
comparing yourself to your mom and your
I
sister.
sometimes I would have to leave.
And then you would feel
It's
shame for
horrible.
not being good enough. So that's
You
why
did feel shame.
that's why people were like, this is so innovative in how you're doing abstract work in order to help people heal,
Mhm.
because it's setting them up almost 100% for success every single time.
Yeah.
And where people have said to me in my art studio, like I just posted a couple on Instagram, how much it's impacted their lives. And they said they say to me, they're like, this is the most beneficial thing that I've done in treatment. And I look forward, and the next week they come back. The people who've told me that they're not artists already have their new color palette. They're like, Brendan, I know what colors. I've been thinking about it all week. I know what colors I want to do today. This is
That's so
and
cool.
it just taps into a different side of their brain.
Well, I don't know if you intended to that, but when you were talking about how you talked to the young lady who had just come out of a fentanyl
Right.
detox, there was a burst of spirituality there in the connection you made with her.
Mhm.
Right.
I
Because
mean,
on a peer level.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important that Art of Our Soul will always be led by trauma survivors, because it's so critical that I can break through. And this is not me like patting myself on the back. I really go with anybody in peer support. I can break through faster to another person like that,
Mhm.
faster than any therapist can who doesn't have that lived experience.
For sure. Yeah.
And
I agree
then
with that.
going back to the story of or not the story, but the experience of choosing your parents
Yeah.
from kind of a pre-existence point of view, that really resonated too. I hadn't thought of that. My mom's, believe it or not, I grew up, told you, up in Fullerton, right next to
Yeah.
you in Anaheim.
Yeah.
My mom's 100, and my mom was from that generation where she
Mm-mm.
never said I love you.
Yeah.
It was just, dinner's ready. She was a great mom,
Right.
and my dad too, in many, many respects. But in terms of communication, it was the dial was down pretty
Yeah.
low. But in her older age, I was over visiting her. I'd try and get up there every week, and she just was gushing with just telling me how much she loved me.
Oh,
And it was like, at first it's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of, I don't need to hear that.
But your
I've
inner
never heard it
child
before.
does. But your
I
inner
mean,
child does.
but it's kind of
Oh.
like, I think maybe I did need, every kid needs to hear that.
Yeah,
And
for
better late than
sure.
never, that's
Right.
great. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like I now have, even though she's 100, I had the mom, the perfect mom. Fine, there's that kind of connection.
She had to get to 100.
Well, this
But-
is a couple
But it
years
is,
ago.
but it
Yeah,
is
but yeah.
generational. My parent, on top of it, my mom's German. We always say, I mean, even with my sisters, we always say, I love you, I love you. But I remember with my dad, because he had dementia and Alzheimer's for a total of 8 years. So for 8 years, I didn't hear I love you at all, because he didn't know who I was. He thought I
Right.
was a stranger, right?
Yeah.
So you got to do their dance, right? But I remember I put his little hat on, and I put his little gate thing on in his wheelchair, and I go, I love you, Daddy. He goes, I love you, honey. And I was like, yeah, I got an I love you after 8
Yeah.
years.
But let me ask you this: how do you how do you raise your children?
Well, I tell my kids I love them at basically every conversation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
that that's what you needed to
Yeah.
hear as a
Yeah.
child, even
Yeah.
though you didn't.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
now you're able to provide
Yeah.
that to
And
your
it's really,
children.
one thing I've done right. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
He
And you're
thinks right.
but you're doing those things, right? Because
Yeah.
of lessons you learned
Yeah.
and your inner child learned from how you were raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can either identify and stand with it,
Uh-huh.
or we can stand against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're able to make those choices about how we were raised. I'm either going to stand with it and continue it, or I'm going to stand against it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And raise my children totally differently.
Yeah.
And by the way, no, I'm not having children. People tell me I should be a dad all the time. It's not happening.
I'm with you, my
You do
friend.
you.
Yeah,
Whatever working is working.
I do not see a purpose of me having a child.
Whatever
always
you're
say it
putting
was-
in your cornflakes, I want some.
I say it was good birth control growing up at my house.
Yes, I'm just
Oh my God, we had so many grommets running around all the
Yep.
time. So I'm with you on that one.
Well, I'm really excited about the stuff that you got in play.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
watching
Yeah.
that grow.
yeah.
If
If it's meant to be, spirit will lead me in that direction. And that's why I don't force anything in my life. And I think that that's the difference between me now and in my former career.
yeah.
And that is the difference of me being spiritually healed now, compared to where I was before. I truly do not force anything in my life.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I don't force it. Even if I want something, I don't force it. I'll manifest with spirit and I'll do techniques to help manifest things in which I am practicing,
Mhm.
but I will not force anything. So like Prescott is just like I had some meetings up there, and sure enough, it's taking off up in Prescott. I'm like, well, this clearly is where I need to go next.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the same thing in Orange County. I don't force anything in my
Mhm.
life though. I let it come when spirit
Yeah.
leads me.
Yeah.
Let me ask you
You have
about
to take but mind you, spirit will not do for you. You still have to take
Yeah.
you still have to take action.
Yeah.
So I will always take action. But I'm always led by spirit. And while I hope and I get visions of what my healing center would eventually look like and be like, I will go if that's where spirit leads me, and I lead my life up as simply
Yeah.
as that.
Mhm.
I love it.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you about Art of Our Soul.
Yeah.
Do you well, you and I, we were talking, off interview, where clinicians will come in from treatment centers with the clients.
Correct. So they do. They're chaperoned by a psychotherapist or a therapist. Yeah.
So
each
as
session.
you facilitating the group, you're not actually facilitating a group. You're just playing music and having fun.
Playing music. I for the first 10 minutes, I just talk about, maybe I'll talk about trauma, maybe I'll talk about my own life experience about relapse, and then we just start pounding the music and we get into it. And what the therapist is there to do is they will notate and they take notes, and then they supply those notes to insurance companies.
Mhm.
But it's really also important that the therapist then also put down their pen and paper and they create artwork at the same table with their clients, because I'm the authority in the room, not the therapist.
Right.
It's my studio. It's why I don't do my artwork at treatment centers. They come to my studio. It also helps create new neural pathways and a new experience.
Mhm.
But the therapist does. And what they don't even understand, which is why I'm now open to team bonding events, because I have seen in real time when the therapist is standing at the same table and they're creating artwork, they're now equals in that art room. And what I have been told by clinical directors is that when they're shuttled back to campus, those clients are more vulnerable in their talk therapy sessions because now they've gotten to bond with their therapist in a
Nice.
unique way. So clinical directors like, keep doing what you're doing and the method that you're doing, because when they come back to campus, they're way more vulnerable in group. They're more open in their one-on-one therapy sessions. So the techs, the therapists, the psychotherapists are the chaperones, and they all create, and they're building each other up. What also is what I call, force team building, those stupid rope climbs and the trust falls.
Mhm.
It's forced, and people go into it with already a block sense.
Yeah.
This is bullshit. This is a joke. My bosses are making me do it because they got sold on some stupid ass team building event. Right. And so what I have
You
seen,
really think, Brandon?
yeah, well, I just think it's true. Sorry, I don't mean to put those companies out of business, but if you're a CEO and you're about to put a blindfold on somebody and do a trust walk, like they're already shitting on you before you go do the event. But what I have seen happen in real time is that after somebody's finished with an art piece, they naturally start walking around the room and they go over to another table to look at everybody else's artwork. And it's always like, oh my God, Brian, holy shit, this is amazing. And Brian goes, you really think so? And Becky's like, this is incredible. They go to the next person. Oh my God, Samantha, how'd your colors, these are beautiful. They don't even realize that they are building each other up in
That's so
real
cool.
time.
Oh, that's so
And they're
great.
team building and they don't even know it because it's not forced.
They're bonding.
They're bonding,
Yeah.
which is now I've opened up my art studio. I'm not open to the general public, but I'm open for team bonding events because I've seen in real time how it helps.
But
I
to
like
be
that.
clear,
Mhm.
the ones that you're going to be doing will be open to the public, or am I missing
No,
that?
I will never be
No.
open to
Oh,
the
you will
general
never
public.
be open. This
No.
is all
Art of
for-
Our Soul will always be for trauma survivors.
Yeah.
It'll always be.
Yeah.
have proper supportive things from all the dimensions.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And not necessarily.
Trust me, the public is trying to get me to open my doors to them in Arizona, but I can't go down that route. I want
Yeah.
Art of Our Soul to be always
It's your niche.
synonymous.
It's your niche.
Because if you don't have the other elements, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you don't have the other elements and support from the therapist and all the
Yeah, mine
angles,
works
it
because
won't-
it's a piece of the pie.
it's a piece
Right.
of-
Mine's
yeah.
not the whole pie.
Yeah.
Nor am I sitting here saying that mine is the whole pie to trauma healing. I am a piece of the pie
Mhm.
that I can use my artwork in a way that helps anxiety because it
Uh-huh.
takes you to a into an alpha state, one of healing, right? Where
Right.
our heart is beating a little bit slower and
Mhm.
it brings down anxiety. So that I can help with, but I can't cure somebody.
Okay.
So treatment centers, nonprofits. However, if I'm at lunch and somebody comes to me, or maybe just an individual or an independent, coaching client of mine who experiences trauma, in that case, would
I
that-
don't do individual sessions.
No, not individuals, but
Yeah.
would they be able to go, or does it have to be?
It has to be
under
through a group
Maybe
or
through a
an
group.
organization.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's really important because then I know that the structure is set up for that person
Okay.
to succeed. So I don't do individual
I-
sessions or do just like one-offs.
It has to be an
get it.
organization. Yeah,
That
makes
makes that
sense.
clicks into place because you want to ensure that people aren't getting a piece of the pie and then fall apart as a consequence of them not having the entire structure that
Correct.
they need for authentic healing.
Yeah.
Correct.
I got it.
Got
Okay.
it.
I'm slow, but I'll get it.
No, this
eventually.
is good.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is really good.
Yeah.
But it is also why my program, when somebody goes to treatment, they have to do 5 to 6 hours of therapy a day. It's
Mhm.
levels of care, 5 or
It's hard.
6,
Yeah,
right?
it's a lot.
So you have to be able to bill for that. You have to go through 5 hours of therapy a day. That is why while I don't do clinical art therapy, what we do is very clinical in our approach into helping somebody heal. And that clinical directors from treatment centers have the same day and the same time every single week because it's that hour of their 5 hours,
Mhm.
right? Because it's in conjunction with the other therapies that they're doing.
Mhm.
Got it.
Got it.
You said earlier it was kind of under the radar. Do you have you said instructional piece? So do you show them a piece, or do they?
No, I
just-
do a piece in front of them every class.
Okay.
So if I have 15 classes a week, I do 15 pieces of art a week.
Do they copy, or do they try to emulate that? Or
Some of them do, but I always tell them, like, the way I create my piece, you do not have to do this. I'm just showing you the technique that I'm
Okay.
doing, but this is your time. Go express yourself in the ways that you want to go express
Awesome.
yourself. Yeah, I don't.
no pressure.
I don't. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
That is so
because
cool.
I'd be out the door.
Oh no, I'm not like you have to line it this way and blow it this way. No, what I do is I'll do different shapes and different designs each and every time. But I show them examples before the class, but I do an example in front of them. And just like if you go to like a Barry's boot camp, like a really good high interval training studio, and they time their music to the beat. I actually have a playlist that actually times it. So when I start swirling the artwork, and it's mesmerizing, even my art assistant, she gets mesmerized as I'm doing it. She goes, "Oh my God, I almost fall asleep watching you create
Oh,
your
wow.
artwork," because it's all to the beat of the music in which I do mine. It's very hypnotizing.
That's so
And then
cool.
they go back and they do their artwork.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing seeing it happen in real
I
time.
love that. I love that. Now, I may be mistaken, but I remember on your Instagram, did you create glass at some point?
So it's resin. So I do
Okay.
resin work.
Okay.
I do resin. It looks like blown glass, like
Yeah.
Chihuly. So I have
Yeah.
pieces that people ask me like, "Oh my gosh, where did you buy all these Chihuly pieces?" I'm like, "Well, thank you. It's not blown glass.
I know.
It's actually resin." But yeah, I just was experimenting. But again, I didn't even realize that, like, I was coming home. Well, I did realize I was coming home from work, from news, and we'd just be so high strung because of what we just, the crap we just reported on, that I would come home, I'd go into my guest room, and I would, wear a respirator, but I would do resin work, and I would pour resin, and I would let it sit for 8 hours, and then I would shape it, and you can actually mold it at that point, and then it turns like what looks like glass.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I kind of
pretty.
get is that there's this network of, and I'm quite convinced the science of trauma recovery is really very, very developed, but you're adding an additional piece of the puzzle that you hope to get integrated throughout the country and
Well, I
beyond.
do, because trauma healing work is a very heavy lift. Like, it could be very dark, it could be very heavy. It just is. I've
Mhm.
experienced that heaviness. Even though I'm trying to heal,
Mhm.
I mean, while we're reprocessing, it's very, very heavy. But what I tell people is that what my piece of the pie is, and while it's helping with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, because we're creating new neural pathways that will release dopamine, the pleasure.
Mhm.
Because if somebody is going through that early stages of trauma recovery and they're not experiencing any dopamine release, why the hell would they continue the healing journey of trauma
Yeah.
if they're not
Right.
experiencing any joys from it?
Yeah.
So that's my role. That's my role. And while it is healing, but we're getting dopamine to be released.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a balance.
And because and I am telling you, every single person has told me when they walk into my studio, "Oh my God, I have been looking forward to this all week." Why?
Aw.
Because they know dopamine is going to be released because they
Yeah.
experienced it the week prior.
Yeah.
And it's different because it's their first time in. They're always like, "What is this place? Like, it's cool, but like, what is this?" But the next week they come, they're like, "Hey, Brandon, it's hugs, it's this, it's that, it's all
Yeah.
that stuff," because their body's already preparing them. Oh my God, we're going to experience pleasure, right? You're not always going to experience pleasure when you're doing EMDR. You're working with my shaman. Trust
Right.
me.
Right.
Like, I take a 30-minute bath in salt to help release and bring my body back grounded, right?
Mm.
And so if I don't experience joy, why am I going to continue to go back? I'm going to stop, which is why even my shaman says, "Brandon, I'll get 3 or 4 sessions in with somebody and then I never hear from them again."
Yeah.
Right. And so because they're like, it's so heavy. Right. And
Mhm.
so my role is like, God, you need to experience joy in those early stages
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
there's a medical doctor. He runs the show at Hoag Hospital in addiction recovery. He's been here, and we ought to have him on our podcast. But anyway, his
He ought to
expression.
join Art of Our Soul for his client.
Well, yeah, he should.
Yeah.
I'll introduce you guys if you
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I would love
But he a terrific guy, and the point is he goes around telling everybody, "Hey, get high." He's telling all these addicts, "Hey, I want you to get high."
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I want you to get high on rock climbing,
Right.
art,
Yeah.
music,
Whatever
you
it
know,
is.
and that's what you just
And that's what I'm
essentially
doing.
said.
I'm
You're
getting 'em
bringing
high.
You're bringing the highs,
Correct.
because we all got to get buzzed.
We all
gotta
have
get
to.
loaded.
And if we don't have to naturally, we're going to find a way
Yeah.
that's not natural to do
Exactly.
it. Our bodies need to experience pleasure,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Amen.
And we
Yep.
just have to figure out ways that will give us those natural highs rather than using a substance, but we will always seek pleasure.
Yeah. And people ask, I've been asked 150 times, because next month I'm headed to Mount Everest, and people, why are you doing that? I thought you even did that. But it's like, it's my way of getting high.
Yes.
You know, I told my cardiologist, she was all over my back, "You shouldn't really do this." It's like, well, okay.
I'm still gonna do it.
But it's like, I got to get high. It's my way of getting high, doing something hard, because I live in a very cushy, lifestyle. There's too much dopamine that's unearned, quite honestly.
Right.
So by doing something difficult, I'm kind of earning my highs.
Yeah.
And it works for me. So but the point I'm trying to make is we got to get
Yeah.
high. We got to identify what works for us and go get high,
Correct.
but just not the counterfeit highs.
Correct.
Exactly.
And like I've experienced, and I just, I know I'm asking a lot from listeners to understand, like I've experienced the fake highs
Mhm.
and I've experienced the real highs. And our bodies do have the capability to experience high
Mhm.
without the bad substances to
Right.
get there. And guess what? There's no hangover from our
Yeah.
natural
Right.
body highs. Our
Yeah.
bodies can recover from that without us hitting super lows.
Yeah.
Because the fake highs will get to a 15, but just as high as you go in that
You
is
go.
how deep you crash.
Yeah.
And that's not the same way with a natural body high.
Right. Yeah. There's no crash.
There's no
Bingo.
crash. We can come down a little bit from it. It's like if you're laughing hysterically, like truly bellyache laugh with
Yeah.
your friends,
Laugh yoga.
you're like experiencing all this dopamine rush and you're laughing in that hysterical
Yeah.
laughter, but we come down, but we're still smiling.
Exactly. Exactly. I find my high on roller coasters. That's my high.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
I love roller coasters.
There are people who love roller coasters for that rush.
Like look on Instagram through extreme roller coasters. I
Yeah.
wanted to start a club when I was in high school.
Yeah, whatever.
But you know what?
I have
It's like,
friends of mine, adult friends, who are in their 40s and they travel their vacations to go to roller coaster parks.
yeah,
Mm.
it's
But I look
fun.
at that and I'm like, it's a lot of your inner child still playing.
That's
It's
true.
a lot of that, like it's like older people who are still into Disney. Whereas like I'm telling you, this is a new perspective of
right.
me. I would look at older men wearing little Mickey Mouse sweatshirts and going to Disneyland. I'd be like, you're a child predator. And I'm speaking out right now to correct myself, rather than looking at and just, typecasting these people. What I am understanding is that no, that's just their inner child coming out to
Mhm.
play, and they're playing with their inner child. They're
Yeah.
going to theme parks. Adults going to theme parks, I used to make fun of. Like adults shouldn't be going to theme parks. No, it's actually allowing their inner child to go
play.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a very healthy way.
Yeah,
Well, that's why I belong
Yeah.
to the Magic Castle,
yeah,
because for me, that's bringing back the fun of being fooled.
It's your inner
Yeah,
child.
it is
Yeah.
my energy, and I totally own it. And
should.
there's a library there I can learn how any trick is done. And I never go in there. I've been in there, but I've never opened a single
Yeah.
book or the videos. I don't
Haven't
want to
written
know,
anything.
because I like being fooled,
Mhm.
and
Right.
I like the if someone fools me, hey,
Yeah.
that's great.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Like the numbers guy. My God, that was crazy.
Yeah.
The mathematician.
We're talking about Tanya. We all went up to the Magic Castle last December, and there was a guy that had pi, 3.1457. He had it memorized to like pages. It
Oh,
was
really?
It was
bizarre.
crazy. Yeah, it
Anyway.
was crazy.
Anyway,
But we left that night, right?
Mm.
Happy and joyful, I mean, and the Magic Castle has like little nuances like everywhere. Like
have you been there?
No.
I
Oh,
was,
dude,
it's pretty
you
cool.
gotta go.
Okay,
When
I'll
you're,
go. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll talk maybe when we're done. We'll try see if we can get you up there this
I mean,
week.
we were laughing, Laura and I, we were laughing so hard. We're sitting on a stool, and all of a sudden it's like she starts going down, down, down. And I'm looking around and I go, Laura, she was like the people behind the bar, the hostess and the hostess or host,
Yeah.
they were laughing because they're witnessing all of this. I'm telling you, we belly laughed for weeks after that. And we still are. It's so funny.
I don't
The seat started going down. We were at the bar.
Oh, they did. They had them
And the
rigged or something.
seat started going down.
Oh yeah. They have it all rigged.
Yeah, I bet.
You
Yeah.
get away with it.
That's all good.
And we have laugh yoga, right?
Right.
And my sister was telling me something not too long ago where she met somebody who had cancer and actually for like 3 years only watched and went to comedy clubs, watched comedy shows. That was it, just all comedy. His cancer went away.
Well, even forced laughter. Like you've seen those videos of people in these huge groups where they're just like, they would be like this, but then they like force themselves to start laughing because they're actually getting a release.
Oh,
from
you
it.
get a dopamine high.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those videos online
Yeah.
of forced laughing? Like go look at YouTube. You'll see like these groups and they'll be like this and they'll be like, ha ha, ha, and then they just get into this laughter and then they start laughing.
They'd start laughing.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah,
it's so
and
funny.
music and there's a chat.
All of it.
Yeah, I use the Led Zeppelin line. Does anyone remember laughter? Because there's so many ways to get these buzzes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Wes Gear,
Yeah.
he's hugely popular here in Orange County
Yeah.
as the Rock to Recovery. I mean, he does the music side of things, and
Yeah.
it's helped him. Of course, it's an art.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
That's a great concert. By the way,
Yeah.
everybody, yeah.
I would like to just kind of throw this out there as this empire builds. We would love to have you back and see this expansion throughout the country and so forth. There are billionaires out there. I guess some of my clients, and the thing about them is that some of them are quite happy, but they're not really happy necessarily because of their money. They're just kind of happy, and some of them are, you know, frankly, pigs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, they are.
Yeah.
But you're right. There needs to be somebody that will, step up to the plate
Mhm.
and say, "Hey, I'm going to put my money to something really beneficial." And
Yeah.
trauma recovery is
And there's science.
Mhm.
I'm not asking them to back something that isn't already being studied by
Right.
science. This isn't like voodoo stuff. No,
Right.
this
Yeah.
is real stuff that we can't. Here's what I'm telling people: we cannot wait for insurance companies to catch up.
Yeah.
We can't waste this time right now. And there are real people. We have the data. We have the research behind us. Why are we going to wait for, the Blue Cross Blue Shields, the Cignas, the Uniteds? Why are we going to wait for them to finally catch up to science where we can help a lot of people heal right now?
now.
And like you have the money, like you have it.
Mhm.
Like, and you're looking for ways to spend it. I'll create the foundation part of it so that you can use it as a tax write-off for you for financial purposes,
Mhm.
even though you could still fund it without it being a tax write-off.
Mhm.
But we can actually use these modalities to help people right now in underserved populations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Well,
You're-
it's going to be
you're a
fun
good heart.
watching the growth
Yeah.
that I'm sure is going to
Mhm.
come. And it's fascinating. I spent like 15 years researching this topic of trauma to write the book, but it sounds like you learned it. You're much quicker. We came to the same conclusions,
Mhm.
Right.
but you came to it much quicker. So I applaud you for that. Because
Well, it's not
Uh,
me. It's truly spirit working through me and
yeah,
understanding the work that I need to do on my lifetime here.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the only reason why I think. And
totally get
I truly believe that that's why I experienced my first relapse in 2020 because at that time I was just going to meetings and I think spirit was looking at me going, no,
Mhm.
he needs to go through this. Like he needs to go through this relapse because he's not on his path. And this is what's going to shake him to its core to finally do the healing work that he needs to do, which will lead him into what I'm doing now. Because had I not
Mhm.
had that relapse in 2020, I can guarantee you this, I would not be sitting here talking to you on this podcast.
Yeah.
I would still be anchoring the news miserable as fuck in Arizona.
Mhm.
So the reason why I experienced that relapse, I'm 100% in belief that that spirit had me go through that in order for me to do that real healing trauma work at the age of 40.
Yeah.
So that I can have this rest of my extended life because I still consider myself to be relatively young at 42.
Mhm.
I have such a long life ahead of me, but look at now how many people I can help because of that relapse.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
totally get
And
it.
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah.
But
So
before we started the interview, you were talking to Mel, our producer, that you are writing another book
Yes.
because there's
let's
so
talk
much.
about that.
Yeah,
Right,
the
'cause
early
there's so much
stages. So the title of it is called 7 Hours of Dark, How a Relapse Saved My Life. And it's really flipping the script on relapse in the recovery community because we look at that and every time somebody relapses, we feel a sense of shame,
Mhm.
like we've let people down and that we're a failure. That's the immediate feelings we have.
Mhm.
And what I really want to flip the script on is like, no, that relapse you just experienced, not suffer, using the word you
Mhm.
experienced is actually a blessing. It's giving you an opportunity to do the inner healing trauma work that you need to do for you to live your soul's purpose.
Yeah.
So it's really flipping the script that you don't go back to 24 hours and restart your time. That's just shame-based approach. It's one of the things that I don't like about a 12-step program is that they make people start their recovery time over. Well, that's shame-based because now
Mhm.
you're shaming them,
Yeah.
telling them they need
Yeah.
to start over from ground zero, which you don't. So I don't believe in counting time. And so it's really flipping the script on the mindset of how we view relapse.
Yeah.
And I view it as a blessing rather than something bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
It's going to be a great read.
a new dimension.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brandon, you've been very generous with
Amazing.
your time.
Yes.
Sure.
I can't thank you
you.
enough. I want to remind our listeners this is like a 2-hour episode. and we break it down into TikToks. We've got millions of views. If you don't,
Right.
if you've got limited time, go to our TikTok channel
Yep.
and watch Brandon and our other wonderful guests for that.
I get so motivated, having our guests. Every time we have a guest on, I'm like, okay, I'm starting fresh. Today I'm
Yeah.
starting fresh. I'm gonna conquer the world. Up. I'm like, that's why I just sit here and I just
It's
listen.
absolutely true. The fear I have is like, oh shit, I got to go back and rewrite that chapter.
No, you don't have to.
It's a relief, and it's like, that's good enough, I guess. So, anyway, thanks, Brandon. And,
Thank you for having me on and having a discussion about it.
Absolutely epic.
Sure.
15 out of 10. So, here on Post-Traumatic Driving, where we die, survive, or thrive.
The choice is yours.
Thanks for supporting our podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on your favorite social media. For books, merchandise, or to donate, visit CoreIQ.com. Post-Traumatic Driving is produced by CoreIQ, a nonprofit with a mission to teach the life skills we all need but are not taught in school. CoreIQ and the Post-Traumatic Driving podcast are for informational purposes only and do not provide medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your licensed medical and mental health care providers.